Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different, by which I mean we're dragging you into the sweltering, dust-choked misery of the American Wild West. That's right. You ever watched a western and thought, I could totally survive that? Number. No, you couldn't. You probably wouldn't survive a full day, not even one sweaty, snake-infested, biscuit-deprived day. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your city and local time in the comments. Let's see who's falling asleep to this in the latest time zone. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up to a sound like dry coughs hitting the inside of your window. It's the wind, but it sounds like it's been smoking Marlboros since 1842. You sit up and immediately regret it because the bed is nothing more than a sagging canvas stretcher, stuffed with what you pray is straw, but probably includes a handful of mice and something that bites. Your back already hurts. Congratulations. You've survived your first Wild West night. Barely. The room around you is dim, and that's being generous. A single crack between the crooked wooden shutters lets in a sliver of hazy orange light. The sun is coming up, and with it comes the promise of an aggressively unpleasant day. There's no insulation, so the heat creeps in instantly, like it's been waiting just outside the door for you to dare wake up. You swing your legs off the bed and your feet hit the dusty plank floor. Dust, the universal carpet of the 1800s. The boards creak under your weight, and the sound echoes weirdly. It's like your tiny one-room shack is both too cramped and too empty. The space smells like wood smoke, sweat, and whatever that is under the floorboards. Hopefully dead. Possibly not. You reach for your boots. Cracked leather things stiff with wear and time. No socks because no one invented comfort yet. As you shove your feet into them, the left one crunches slightly. You pause. Was that a scorpion? A rock? Your own hope? Dying quietly? You decide not to check and just stomp hard enough to scare off whatever small creature might still be squatting in your shoe. The outfit you slept in? Yeah, that's also your outfit for the day. Maybe the week. You've got 2 shirts max, and they rotate every few days whether they need washing or not. And they definitely do. The air is already heating up, thick with grit that coats your teeth and lines your lungs. You haven't even stepped outside yet, and you're already sweating. You reach for your hat, wide-brimmed, battered, and barely holding together. It's less fashion, more survival tool. It's the only thing standing between your face and a sunburn so intense your skin would peel off like a biscuit crust. You slap it on and feel the immediate regret of warm, stale sweat pressed against your forehead. You try not to think about lice. They love it out here too. Outside, the town is just a series of wooden rectangles that look like they were built by a bunch of guys who all argued over what structurally sound means. Horses are tied up in front of the saloon, snorting and stomping. A tumbleweed does a perfect movie roll across the road like it's on cue, and you wonder if tumbleweeds know how cliché they are. The sun is now fully up, glaring down like an angry god who hates moisture. You inhale, and it's like breathing through burlap. The air smells of manure, stale beer, and the faint, ever-present scent of something burning that you can never quite identify. Maybe it's the forge, maybe it's dinner, maybe it's someone's barn again. A man shuffles by wearing suspenders and a hat made of something that once had teeth. He nods at you like you're both survivors of some unspoken trauma, which, to be fair, you are. It's only 6:15 a.m, and already you feel like you've fought in a war. Down the street a bell clangs once. That's the general store opening, which means if you want the slightly less mouldy bread or the one remaining bar of soap that isn't entirely cracked, now's the time. You start walking that way, but the sun is relentless and your boots are already beginning to blister your heels. The dirt road is littered with wagon ruts and mysterious brown smears. You try not to think too hard about what caused them. There's a well in the centre of town surrounded by a low wooden fence. You watch a woman in a bonnet pull up a bucket of water, then strain it through a cloth that looks like it's never once been washed. She nods at you, then goes back to trying to keep her toddler from drinking directly from the trough. Good luck with that. Nearby, a man is yelling at a goat. The goat is winning. You make it to the general store and grab a handful of items, coffee beans, a tin cup, some dried beans, and wince as you trade 2 silver coins for them. Everything costs more than you expected, probably because everything had to be dragged in over mountains, rivers, and at least one failed robbery attempt. Money means nothing here unless you've got it in exact change, and even then, the store owner eyes you like, you might try to steal a spoon. Outside, the sun climbs higher, and the sound of hammering starts echoing from the blacksmith's forge. You can already smell hot iron and sweat. That's your neighbour, Josiah, and he's been working since before dawn, shirtless and somehow still wearing long pants. His entire body is red from heat and effort, and he nods at you like, "Yep." Another day not dying. You nod back. And just like that, it's been 2 hours and you're already exhausted. Your teeth feel like they've got a gravel coating, your skin itches in at least 5 places, and you're pretty sure something in your boot has started to bite back. This is the easy part of the day. It only gets worse from here. Oh, and fun historical fact to ponder while your sweat evaporates faster than your will to live. There were entire towns out here that had no doctors, no lawmen, and no real maps. You just guessed where you were half the time. Fun. Quirky side note, some people actually paid money to move out here voluntarily. You're not sure who hurt them, but wow, they must have really hated their old neighbours. As for historians, there's still a mild debate over whether life on the frontier was more about individual freedom or just a chaotic mess of constant survival. Honestly, standing here with your boots full of gravel and a lizard watching you from the saloon steps, it's feeling like the latter. So let's talk about your morning routine, or more accurately, the total absence of one. You shuffle back toward your shack, clutching your overpriced tin cup and slightly dented bag of beans. The coffee isn't ground yet, because of course it isn't. That's your job now, along with hauling water, making fire, and not dying of dysentery before lunch. You push open the door to your one-room home, and are immediately greeted by the subtle aroma of stale sweat, scorched wood, and something deeply unpleasant wafting up from the corner. Probably the chamber pot. You haven't emptied it since yesterday. Welcome to personal hygiene, 1880s edition. There's no sink, no mirror, no toothbrush. You know that tingly fresh, minty clean feeling you get after brushing your teeth in modern life? Yeah, that hasn't been invented yet. Toothbrushes exist, technically, if you're lucky enough to own one, but they're made of boar bristles jammed into bone or wood, and they feel like scrubbing your gums with a twig dipped in regret. You, of course, don't have one. What you have is a finger and some charcoal powder that smells faintly like old bacon. You dip your finger in the stuff and rub it over your teeth. It makes a soft crunching sound, which is not comforting, and your gums start bleeding about 10 seconds in. Apparently this is normal. You swish some tepid water from last night's bucket around your mouth, spit it out the door and hope your neighbour's goat doesn't drink it again. It has no boundaries. Your tongue still feels like it's wearing a wool sweater, but at least your teeth aren't actively fuzzy anymore. Progress. There's no deodorant. That's not a thing yet. You could rub some crushed sage leaves into your pits if you're feeling fancy, but you're not. You're already sweating, and you haven't even boiled water yet. You consider washing your face, but the water barrel is low and the nearest well is a 10-minute walk away. You decide against it. What's a little extra grime between friends? For the record, this is your second day out here. You haven't bathed. You won't probably until Saturday, which is bath day in town, when a big metal tub is hauled into the saloon's back room, and you pay 15 cents for the privilege of sitting in the same murky water that the last 3 people used. Soap? That cost extra. Towels? Bring your own. Privacy? Absolutely not. Your hair feels like it's been soaked in bacon grease and then rolled in dust. You tie it back with a strip of worn cloth and move on. There are bigger problems on the horizon than your scalp's personal oil spill. You glance around your shack. The window doesn't open. The hinges rusted shut last spring. There's a small, crooked shelf nailed into the wall with 3 items: a tin plate, a dull knife, and a half-empty bottle of vinegar you once used as medicine, cleaning fluid, and seasoning. You might have also tried it on a wound once. Did it work? Unclear, but it definitely stung like betrayal. You strike a match and light the small fire pit in the corner. It smokes aggressively because the wood is damp, but you fan it with a bent piece of tin until it grudgingly catches. You set a small kettle of water to boil, which takes roughly the amount of time it would take to walk to the next town and back. While you wait, you try to grind your beans with the back of your knife on a flat rock. It's not elegant, it's not effective, but it's all you've got. You manage to get a small pile of jagged shards, which you then dump directly into your boiling water. The result tastes like sadness filtered through an old sock. Still, you drink every drop. There's a distinct kind of silence out here, one that's never fully silent. A low wind keeps brushing against the door, making it creak like a ghost clearing its throat. You can hear someone shouting in the distance, possibly yelling at a cow, or maybe the cow is yelling back. It's hard to tell. You sip your gritty coffee and stare at the one nail in the wall where your other shirt used to hang. It's gone now, stolen maybe, or eaten by moths, or traded away for a single apple last week you can't even remember. The days bleed together here. Historically speaking, very few people had good teeth in the 19th century West. Dentists were rare and terrifying, and toothpaste wasn't standard until the 20th century. You were more likely to carry a pair of pliers than a toothbrush, and if you had a toothache, you either lived with it until it fell out or paid someone with questionable hygiene to yank it in the back of the saloon, possibly while you were drunk. Most people considered losing their teeth before age 30 just part of life, right up there with cholera and wearing long underwear year-round. But here's a fun, weird fact. People in the Old West were obsessed with patent medicines. You could buy tonics promising to cure everything from bad breath to baldness, and a lot of them were just alcohol, opium or turpentine in a fancy bottle. Some people even swore by brushing with gunpowder. For real. Imagine ending your day with some fresh powder, and then blowing into a kerosene lamp. Boom! Clean teeth, no eyebrows. And yes, historians still argue about just how dirty people really were back then. Some say they bathed more than we assume, at least when water was available. Others insist that bathing was rare, uncomfortable, and usually skipped. Given your current level of grime and the distinct odour rising from your armpits, you're gonna guess the truth leans toward the stinkier side. Outside, the sun is officially blazing. There's no shade except for the occasional warped awning or the belly of a very uncooperative mule. You toss the last dregs of your coffee out the window, consider licking the inside of the cup for caffeine residue, and decide to maintain a sliver of dignity. But barely. You grab your hat and step back outside where the air has already turned to soup. Hot, dry soup made of dust and despair. You've made it through the grooming portion of your morning, if you can call it that. You're technically ready to face the day. You smell like desperation. Your mouth tastes like burnt dirt, and there's a chance you've started developing scurvy. But hey, you're up, and that's something. Now that you've powered through your morning routine, which involved bleeding gums, a smoky fire pit, and a beverage best described as bean-flavoured gravel water, it's time for breakfast. You're already hungry, which is a shame, because the frontier doesn't really care about your hunger, cravings, or basic nutritional needs. You shuffle over to your wooden crate of provisions, which consists of 2 mould-flecked onions, a piece of jerky as stiff as a tombstone, and a half-empty sack of dry pinto beans. That's it. No eggs, no toast, no butter, just sadness, legumes, and maybe a side of regret. You pick up the beans and shake them around like they'll magically become a breakfast burrito. They do not. So you dump a handful into a rusty tin pot, add some water from yesterday's ration, and place the whole thing over your struggling fire. They'll take at least an hour to cook, and you know they'll still be underdone and slightly crunchy, because you didn't soak them overnight. You forgot, okay? It's hard to remember things when your pillow is just a folded pair of pants, and your sleep was interrupted by raccoons fighting under your floorboards again. As the beans sputter in their bath of almost water, you gnaw on a strip of jerky. It tastes like smoked leather with a sprinkle of despair. Your jaw starts to ache within seconds, and you suddenly remember that human teeth weren't designed to chew wood. But chewing is all part of the morning experience. Each bite is a game of will this crack my molar? Spoiler, it might. You pause after 3 chews, stare out the crooked window and consider just licking the jerky like a meat lollipop until the beans are done. There's no milk. Cows are expensive and complicated, and your neighbour's cow kicked him into a trough last week, so he's not exactly generous with the dairy. There's no fruit either, not unless you count the dried apple slice you traded for last month, which you immediately dropped into the fire by accident. You still think about it sometimes. That was a dark day. Instead, you sit cross-legged on the floor, bowl in hand, spoon carved from a chunk of pine, and eat your beans. They're crunchy. You pretend they're al dente. The flavour is something like warm dirt and ash. Maybe there's a bit of bacon grease left over from last week, adding a hint of salty smoke. Or maybe it's just soot. Either way, your stomach quiets down enough to let you think straight again. Sort of. You stare at the wall while eating and notice a spider the size of your thumb dangling from a crack in the ceiling. You name him Breakfast Buddy and keep your eye on him, just in case he's got ideas about joining your meal. He doesn't. Probably smarter than you. In towns like this, refrigeration is just a wild fantasy. No iceboxes unless you live near a river or happen to know a guy who trades with the mining camp up north where there's snow. Perishable food gets eaten fast or not at all. That's why everything's dried, smoked, salted or fermented. Including the people, apparently. Everyone out here looks like they've been sun-dried and lightly brined. Historically, the average settler or cowboy had a diet that made today's junk food look like a health cleanse. Beans, coffee, hardtack, which is basically a flour brick, salt pork and whatever you could shoot, skin and cook before it spoiled. Vegetables were rare. Fresh fruit? That's a shipping from the coast luxury. Vitamin C deficiency was so normal, people thought bleeding gums were just part of aging. And here's your quirky tidbit of the day. In some saloons and trading posts, pickled eggs were considered a delicacy. You'd find big jars full of eggs soaking in vinegar on the bar counter, floating ominously like little pale orbs of disappointment. Some people loved them. Others claimed they were just decoration, or punishment. No one really knows. There's still debate among food historians, yes, that's a real job, about how much variety frontier folks actually had. Some say local gardens were more common than we assume, while others argue most people lived off the same 5 ingredients rotated into a kind of culinary purgatory. Based on your current breakfast situation, it definitely feels like the purgatory crowd was right. Once the beans are gone, you rinse your bowl with a splash of warm water and call it clean. You wipe it dry on your shirt. Yes, the same shirt you've been wearing for 3 days. No, it doesn't help. The smell is now part of your identity. Outside, the town is beginning to buzz. The blacksmith's hammer rings through the air. Someone is yelling about a missing mule. A pair of kids are chasing a chicken that clearly does not want to be caught. And from the saloon, you hear someone playing a clumsy piano tune that ends in what might be a gunshot, or just the piano finally giving up. You step out into the brightness, belly full of half-cooked beans, teeth still gritty from coffee grounds and jerky, and already feel the heat building. There's a thin layer of dust on your shoulders and in your eyelashes, and when the wind picks up, it gives your skin a fresh coating of earth. You're slowly becoming a sedimentary layer. You pass your neighbour, Martha, who nods at you while hanging her laundry. She's got 2 dresses, both the same shade of was once blue. One of them flaps in the breeze like a ghost having an existential crisis. You wave. She nods again. No one says much in the morning. Talking is a luxury saved for cooler hours. There's not much else to do now but wait for the heat to peak and see what the rest of the day wants from you. Spoiler, it's not going to be kind. You sit on your porch step and take a deep breath through your nose. It smells like beans, burnt pine, horse sweat, and maybe something dead nearby. The mystery scent returns. It always does. Maybe you'll find it one day. Maybe not. And with that, your breakfast is over. It's not satisfying, but it's calories. Sort of. You've got just enough energy to move on with your day. Maybe head to town. Maybe try to find some work. Maybe just avoid getting bit by something venomous. The possibilities are endless, and none of them sound pleasant. Getting dressed in the Wild West is a full-body act of masochism disguised as necessity. You'd think it would be simple. Just toss on some clothes and head out, right? Number. First, your options are extremely limited. You open the rickety crate that serves as your dresser and stare at the 3 garments inside. One stiff, sun-faded wool shirt, a pair of trousers so patched they're 40% other people's clothes, and a long, scratchy undershirt that's somehow always damp no matter the weather. This is your wardrobe. All of it. The fashion gods are not here. You start with the undershirt. It's made of unbleached wool and has the texture of a cheese grater crossed with fiberglass. As you pull it over your head, it sticks to every possible surface. Skin, hair, dignity. It smells like smoke, old sweat, and sheep. You shudder. Next come the trousers. They're made from canvas so stiff you're pretty sure it could double as armour in a bar fight. You wriggle into them with the grace of someone being slowly devoured by an aggressive tent. There's no elastic, no zippers, just buttons and a prayer. Your belt is a thick leather strap that requires both hands and a knee to fasten. It has one job: keep your pants up while also reminding you that breathing is optional. You pull it tight and feel your stomach flatten in protest. Excellent. You can't bend at the waist now, but at least you're secure. Then comes your shirt. It's heavy. It's hot. It's basically a wearable oven mitt. The collar scratches your neck like an itchy ghost, and the sleeves are too short because they shrank in the rain last month. You roll them up, even though the sun is out and your forearms are already sunburned. No one wins. And let's not forget your boots. Ah, the boots. They look cool from a distance, all rugged and worn like something out of a movie. but the moment you slide your foot in, you remember why your ancestors had foot problems. They're hard leather, unlined, and about as forgiving as a tax collector with a grudge. You tug them on, 1 foot at a time, using a metal hook to loop the back up over your heel. You immediately feel blisters forming in places you didn't know had nerves. You try walking. Every step is a crunch, a pinch, a silent scream. Your toes curl in self-defense. Your arches start bargaining for a better life. Cowboy boots were designed for horseback, not sidewalks, and definitely not walking 5 miles to buy flour in 90-degree heat. But you walk anyway, because sitting around means smelling yourself for longer, and honestly, that's worse. You reach for your outer layer, a leather vest that smells like wet dog, but pause. It's already hot, and layering up feels like a slow-bake recipe for heat stroke. Still, it has pockets, and you need pockets. You put it on, you instantly regret it. Sweat begins its slow, inevitable journey from your back to your socks. You top it off with your hat. The wide-brimmed, sun-stained beast is the only thing standing between your scalp and second-degree burns. You slap it on your head and feel your body temperature rise by 3 degrees. But hey, style. Now that you're fully dressed, you feel like a roast wrapped in burlap. Every movement itches, sticks, or rubs. You're technically clothed, but you're not comfortable. Nothing breathes. There's no such thing as moisture wicking. Underwear exists, but it's wool long johns, and you're not desperate enough to deal with those today. Not yet. And let's talk historical context for a second. People in the Wild West didn't dress to be cool. They dressed to survive, to not get sunburned, scraped, or bit by things with too many legs. Layers meant protection. From the sun, from bugs, from the occasional tumble off a horse or bar stool. Fabric was thick because thin cloth tore and didn't last. And laundry. That was once a week, at best, done in a basin with lye soap that stripped your clothes and your soul. Fun fact, wool was the most common fabric because it kept you warm when it was cold and kind of cool when it was hot, supposedly. Spoiler, it was still miserable. Some cowboys even wore dusters, long coats meant to keep dirt off their clothes. You think about that now and laugh bitterly. More layers? No thanks. You'd rather just roll in the dirt and call it good. And for something a little more fringe, did you know that in some towns, dress codes were enforced? You could be fined for dressing indecently, which could mean too much skin, the wrong type of hat, or not wearing a proper cravat to church. Imagine being fined for not sweating enough. That's frontier justice for you. Historians still debate how authentic cowboy attire really was. Some claim the wild, leather-heavy look is more Hollywood than history. Others say it varied wildly by region. What a cattle wrangler wore in Texas looked nothing like a prospector in Nevada. Either way, one thing is universally agreed upon. Nobody was comfortable. You step outside, fully geared up, and immediately feel the sun blast your shoulders like a giant heat lamp. The dust clings to your clothes within seconds, sticking to sweat like seasoning. You walk down the dirt road, your boots thudding like mini anvils, your thighs already chafing, your back developing a sunstripe from the hole in your shirt. You see someone ride by on horseback, wearing fewer layers than you and looking twice as cool. You hate them just a little. Your boot squeaks, your belt pinches, your socks bunch up at the heel, and you consider sitting down right there in the dirt. But no, you've come this far. You're going to town even if it costs you your sanity and most of your skin. So here you are, dressed in what can only be described as survival cosplay, stomping down a dusty road in boots that were designed to break you. You smell like a smoked pig in a sweat lodge, and every breath tastes like burnt leather and frustration. But hey, you look the part. Kind of. You thought cowboy boots would make you feel like some rugged frontier legend, some silent hero with a 6-shooter and a cool nickname like Dusty Joe or Cactus Jack. Instead, you feel like a toddler in their dad's shoes, clomping down the uneven street like a wounded duck with attitude problems. Every step you take is a negotiation between leather, flesh, and the rapidly forming blister on your right pinky toe. Who designed these things? A sadist with a foot grudge? You try to walk normally, but the boots have different ideas. They're stiff, unforgiving, and high enough to chafe your calves raw. You can't tell if they're too big, too small, or just objectively wrong. There's no padding inside, of course. Just rough hide and the faint smell of whatever animal gave its life for this unholy footwear. You suspect the boots used to belong to someone else, someone with a limp. That would explain the lopsided tread and the way your left foot now feels permanently tilted. You head toward the general store again, mostly because it's one of the only buildings in town that sells literally anything, and because it's a place to stand for a moment out of the sun. Each step feels like punishment. The dirt road is full of ruts and mystery holes, and every time your foot sinks even slightly, a new muscle in your leg files a complaint. The boots were never made for walking long distances. Cowboys rode horses, remember? Walking was for poor fools like you, who have neither horse nor mule nor decent arch support. Halfway down the road, a dog barks at you. A loud, gnarled bark that echoes in your soul. It's one of those dusty frontier dogs that looks like it survived 3 prairie fires, a snake bite, and a duel. It limps into the street, stares you down and growls. You freeze. It stares. You stare. Eventually it huffs and wanders off like you weren't even worth the effort. Fair. You stop outside the store, sweat dripping into your eyes, calves aching, boots pinching with malicious intent. You try shifting your weight from foot to foot, but all that does is spread the pain around evenly, like buttering misery on toast. You lean against the wooden post outside the store and try to look casual. You probably look like someone trying not to cry in public. Back in the day, cowboy boots weren't the sleek, stylized fashion statement they are now. Originally, they were built purely for function. High heels to hook into stirrups, tall shafts to protect legs from brush and snakes, and narrow toes to slide into saddles. Comfort was secondary. Actually, no. Comfort wasn't even on the list. If the boots didn't give you trench foot or eat your pinky toe in your sleep, they were considered broken in. Fun fact, some cowboys used to fill their boots with warm water and wear them until they dried to break them in. Others would soak them in urine, which, while horrifying, probably did soften the leather. You contemplate your own options now and realise you'd need at least 2 days of hydration and a private corner of the prairie to even try that. Pass. There's another guy standing outside the store, older, probably in his 60s, with a face like cracked leather and eyes that look like they've seen 17 years of dust storms and disappointment. He glances down at your boots and chuckles. "New, huh?" he says, gesturing at your feet with the tip of his corncob pipe. You nod, trying not to whimper. Yeah, trying to break them in. He grins, revealing 3 teeth and a lifetime of not caring. Good luck. First pair I ever wore took 2 toenails and my will to live. You'll adjust. You try to laugh. It comes out more like a wheeze. Inside the store, the floorboards creak ominously under your boots. Like even the building disapproves of your choices. You shuffle awkwardly toward the shelves, pretending to browse while internally screaming. Everything hurts. Everything. There's not even a bench. Frontier stores were built for transactions, not comfort. You grab a small tin of balm. Maybe it'll help your feet, or at least distract you from the pain. The label promises relief for chafing, bruises, burns, scrapes, and general foot anguish. Close enough. You pay your coin and hobble back outside, the sun now high enough to boil your shadow. Across the street, a kid sprints by barefoot, laughing and waving a stick. You hate him instantly. How is he surviving out here with no shoes? His feet must be made of horn and regret. Maybe you were just born in the wrong century, or the wrong species. Historical debate time. There's some argument over just how widespread and standard cowboy boots were. Some historians claim they were a specialised item mostly for actual wranglers and cattle drivers, not every guy walking around Tombstone buying beans. Others say boots were as common as hats, just part of the daily uniform. Either way, they weren't built for walking long distances. You wore them to ride, to stand around looking cool, or to kick indoors dramatically, not to stroll casually to the mercantile and back. You make it halfway home before your right foot completely rebels. You stop, sit on a low water barrel and actually pull your boot off. Big mistake. The air hits your foot like cold betrayal, and the second you see the blister forming on your heel, you know you're doomed. That's not a blister. It's a canyon. Your sock is damp and crusty, and there's a smell that suggests something died in there last week. You sit in silence, foot bare, boot in hand, questioning your choices. What was the plan again? Live a peaceful, rustic life out west. Find yourself. Start over. That version of you didn't factor in leather torture devices for footwear or dust, so fine it gets behind your eyeballs. You eventually force the boot back on, because you have no other choice, and hobble the rest of the way to your shack, now sweating, limping, and very close to tears. You throw yourself onto the porch like a dramatic 19th century opera ghost and stare at the sky, praying for clouds. None appear. The sun keeps staring. Welcome to Wild West fashion. Hope you brought extra toenails. It hits you right around mid-morning. That biological signal that can't be ignored. That primal whisper from your gut saying, "Hey, it's time to take care of business." But unlike your cozy 21st century world of porcelain thrones and scented candles, the Wild West has other ideas. You rise slowly from your porch, already regretting the extra beans, and begin the noble, treacherous quest to find a bathroom. Except, of course, there isn't one. Indoor plumbing? That's a fantasy reserved for rich people in faraway cities with cobblestones and government. Out here, if you're lucky, your homestead has an outhouse. Basically a wooden box over a hole that you built yourself with hope, hammer, and a handful of nails that bent the wrong way. Yours? It's a leaning structure behind your shack, barely standing, roof optional, door missing. Wind whistles through it like a flute made of despair. You've been putting off fixing it for weeks. Every time you go near it, a wasp takes it personally. Still, nature waits for no one. You grab your wiping cloth, an old rag that's seen things, and make the stiff-legged trek out back, dodging chicken droppings and the remains of what may have once been a raccoon. The sun is already high, baking the earth into a crust that cracks under your boots. You reach the outhouse and open what passes for a door, a creaky plank leaning on rusted hinges, and immediately gag. The smell hits like a punch to the soul, a blend of fermented ammonia, despair, and long-dead dreams. It's somehow both hot and damp inside, which doesn't seem meteorologically possible. You step in and brace yourself. The wooden seat is splintery, worn smooth only in places, and home to approximately 4,000 species of spiders, at least 3 of which you've personally seen. You don't sit so much as hover cautiously, one hand bracing the side of the wall, the other swatting at flies with a rolled-up newspaper from 2 months ago. Your entire body clenches in protest. The wind shifts, blowing hot air directly into the tiny enclosure, and you question everything that led you to this moment. The smell alone could end civilizations. There's no toilet paper, of course not. What you have is corn cobs, don't ask, catalogue pages, or that rag. You go with the catalogue. It's rough, barely absorbent, and printed with ink that might leave permanent poetry on your skin. But it's that or leaves, and you still haven't figured out which ones make you itch. Historically, this is more accurate than you want it to be. People in the Wild West did their business in outhouses, holes, or behind the nearest bush. Toilet paper wasn't commercially available until the late 1800s, and even then it was expensive and suspiciously splintery. Most folks used whatever was on hand: grass, wool scraps, newspaper, or the pages of the Sears Roebuck catalogue, and no one talked about it, because they were too busy surviving. You finish up and exit the outhouse like a veteran emerging from battle. You're sweating in new places. You take a moment to stand in the sun, arms akimbo, inhaling freshish air and trying not to think about the things that just happened to you. You leave the door ajar so the wasps can reclaim their throne. Then there's the other option. If you're not near your own place, or out on the trail, or too terrified of what's moved into your outhouse, there's always the old faithful bush. You start eyeing shrubbery the same way modern people look for Wi-Fi signals. There's one near the edge of town, a scraggly little juniper that's become the unofficial bathroom for anyone who's too lazy, drunk, or desperate to make it elsewhere. You've used it once. It was breezy and highly public. You remember that time now. You'd just finished when a group of children came around the corner playing tag, and there you were, mid-squat, trying to look invisible behind a bush that offered no actual concealment. You locked eyes with a 6-year-old who probably still talks about that strange squatting man to this day. And if you think town life is bad, try travelling. Travellers often carried necessary bags for when the urge struck in the middle of nowhere. Basically a kit of cloth, soap, and whatever paper they hadn't used for writing yet. Stagecoaches didn't stop for bathroom breaks. You stopped at a tree, squatted in the grass, and prayed no rattlesnake had the same idea. Here's a strange little historical nugget for your already overloaded brain. Some wealthier folks actually had chamber pots lined with velvet. That's right. Velvet in a potty. Because why not? If you're going to suffer, might as well make it plush. Unfortunately, velvet's not great for cleaning and, well, it didn't catch on. You head back inside and pour yourself a cup of lukewarm water. It tastes faintly of tin and wood rot, but it washes away the memory, slightly. You sit down on the edge of your bed and stare into the middle distance, your body stiff, your dignity fractured. The worst part? This isn't a one-time thing. This is daily. You'll do it again tomorrow, and the next day, and if you're ever lucky enough to have guests over, they'll get to enjoy the same aromatic wonderland of your backlot restroom. And, oh, nighttime, you think it's bad during the day? Try answering the call of nature at 3 a.m, in the pitch-black dark, with only a flickering oil lamp and the sound of coyotes howling in the distance. That's when the bathroom turns from unpleasant to spiritual trial. You ever try to hover in the dark with a snake possibly underfoot, and a breeze threatening to tip you sideways? It's humbling. Modern historians tend to gloss over this part of frontier life. They'll tell you about land expansion, community building, and manifest destiny, but no one wants to discuss the bathroom situation. And yet, it was constant, and terrible, and a defining part of the experience, because it turns out when you take away plumbing, the human body doesn't suddenly adapt. You just suffer in new and creative ways. You glance at your boots, now streaked with dirt and who knows what from the trip to the outhouse. You consider taking them off. You don't. You know what's out there now. So you sit there in your shack slightly broken, knowing full well that you're only a few hours away from needing to do it all again. But at least for now, you've survived one of the worst parts of frontier living. Barely. Good job, champ. It's midday now, and you're sweating in places you didn't even know could sweat. The sun is directly overhead, glaring down like a cosmic interrogation lamp. You've survived breakfast, brushing your teeth with what was basically gravel and your outhouse odyssey. But now you face your next great test: hydration. Out here, water is more precious than gold, horses, or winning a gunfight without getting shot. Without it, you're a soon-to-be decorative skeleton for buzzards to perch on. Your water barrel sits outside your shack in the shade. Barely. It's a squat wooden thing, ringed with rusty metal bands and lined with mildew that smells vaguely like mushrooms and feet. You take off the lid and peer inside. There's water in there, technically. About 2 inches of it, cloudy and swirling with bits of leaf, dust, and what might be a drowned beetle doing a dead man's float. You hesitate. You're thirsty, bone dry, tongue like burlap thirsty, but the water looks like it comes with a side of intestinal regret. You sniff it. It smells like wet wood and bad choices. You consider boiling it, but that would require building another fire, which would make you sweat even more, which would make you need even more water. It's a dusty cycle of doom. So you do what many people did back then. You take your chances. You dip your tin cup in, avoiding the bug as best you can, and bring the lukewarm, questionably filtered liquid to your lips. It tastes like it's been aging in a barn. There's a faint hint of iron, a dash of algae, and the unmistakable flavour of might cause stomach cramps later. Still, it's water, and your body greedily accepts it, even as your brain files a formal protest. In town, there's a well, but everyone uses it. And while it's deeper and supposedly cleaner, the bucket's shared, the rope is fraying, and there's a good chance some teenager dropped a dead possum in it as a prank last week. You've seen what passes for filtration around here: cloth sacks, charcoal chunks, and good old-fashioned hope. Water sources out here are sketchy at best. Wells go dry, rivers get muddy, rain barrels grow things. And if you're on the trail, you're drinking from streams and praying upstream is free of bloated livestock. Cholera, typhoid, dysentery, those weren't just words in textbooks. Those were everyday guests at the frontier dinner table. You'd drink to quench your thirst and roll the dice every time. Fun historical fact: pioneers used to flavour their water with vinegar or lemon if they had it. Partly for taste, mostly to kill whatever might be swimming in it. Whiskey was also considered a valid hydration source. Yes, really. Some folks thought alcohol killed germs, which technically it does, just not when it's diluted in ditch water and chugged by a guy who hasn't bathed in a week. You, unfortunately, don't have lemon, vinegar or whiskey. You just have dust, your tin cup, and whatever faith remains in your digestive system. You finish your water and set the cup down on the porch, letting it catch any stray wind-blown specks that happen by. Hydration, frontier style. Your neighbour, Old Man Fletcher, walks past just then, carrying a bucket of water from the well with the casual strength of someone who's been hauling liquid death for 40 years. He tips his hat. Hot one today, he says, as if that's ever not the case. He smells like tobacco, sun, and mild regret. You nod. Water's low. He squints toward your barrel. Yeah, it'll do that. Better fill it tonight when it's cooler. Don't want the sun cooking the bugs into it. You stare at him, unsure if that's advice or a riddle. Either way, he keeps walking, bucket sloshing. You spend the next few minutes debating whether to hike to the well now or wait until dusk. Dusk means cooler temperatures, fewer people, and less chance of boiling your brain under the sun. But it also means coyotes, drunkards, and navigating a trail with zero lighting, and at least one owl that screeches every time you pass. Out on the frontier, water wasn't just about thirst, it was about survival math. You had to think in gallons per person, per day. You had to haul it, guard it, and ration it. Bathing, a luxury. Washing clothes, once a week if that. Brushing teeth. You've already experienced that nightmare, and don't even get started on livestock. Horses alone drank 10 gallons a day. You, on the other hand, are lucky if you get 2, and half of that ends up evaporating off your forehead. Fringe fact incoming. Some folks believed water had moods. There were stories about haunted springs, cursed wells, and streams that would take a man's mind. Usually those were contaminated with something funky, but the legends persisted. People were suspicious of any water that flowed too fast, too slow, too clear, or too dark. Basically all water. And to be fair, they had a point. You don't trust anything that doesn't have a visible expiration date anymore. You once drank from a stream while on a nature hike last year, how quaint that sounds now, and spent 3 days glued to a bathroom afterward. Compared to that, this barrel water is almost comforting. No, not comforting, just familiar. Like a slap you know is coming. You wipe your forehead with your sleeve, then regret it because now you've got sweat and dirt smeared across your entire face. You look like a chimney sweep who lost a fight with a pig. You consider going inside and pouring some of that precious water over your head, but that would mean less for drinking later. So instead, you sit on the porch, let the heat cook your brain a little more, and fantasize about ice cubes. You remember ice vaguely. Cold things. Refreshing things. You would give a whole day's rations for a lukewarm soda at this point, but that's not reality. Reality is warm, dusty, and full of thirst. So you sit there, cup in hand, watching dust devils spin down the road like tiny tornadoes with places to be. Your tongue sticks to the roof of your mouth again. You glance at the barrel, still murky, still your best option. You take another sip, and hope, once more, that the weird floating thing isn't sentient. You know something's wrong the second your jaw twinges. It starts as a dull throb near your back molar, almost like you've been clenching too hard, probably because you have. The pain isn't sharp, just annoying, like a splinter made of pressure living in your face. You try to ignore it, sip some more sun-warmed barrel water, swish and spit. That'll fix it, right? Number. It doesn't. It gets worse. Fast. By early afternoon, you're pacing your shack, one hand clamped to your jaw like that's going to hold your tooth in place. The throbbing has levelled up into something that feels like a railroad spike being hammered into your gums. You can barely chew, barely think. That old jerky from breakfast might have chipped something, or maybe the charcoal toothpaste finally rebelled. Either way, you're in the kind of pain that makes you question every life choice that led you here, starting with your decision to try something different and move out west. Big mistake. In the city, this would mean a quick call to the dentist, an appointment with a reclining chair, and a bit of Novocaine. Maybe some smooth jazz playing in the background while you breathe in the gentle scent of antiseptic and regret. But you're not in the city anymore, you're in Dustville, and Dustville's idea of dental care involves pliers, whiskey, and a man named Doc Miller, who may or may not have graduated from anything. You limp into town, cradling your jaw like it's a wounded bird. The sun's still high, and every bounce of your boot sends a jolt of agony through your skull. You pass the saloon, where a man with a violin and no sense of rhythm is sawing away at a tune. His screechy notes feel like physical violence. You squint through the pain and keep walking. Doc Miller's place is technically the back room of the apothecary, which is also the front room, which is also just a single room in general. The outside is painted white. Well, it was painted white, in some year long forgotten. And a hand-painted sign above the door reads in wobbly black letters, "Surgery and teeth, walk in or crawl." Inside, the room smells like herbs, smoke, and something vaguely metallic. You stand there awkwardly, waiting, until a curtain swishes open and out walks Doc Miller himself. He's wearing a stained apron, rolled up sleeves, and a look of casual disinterest that does not inspire confidence. "Which side?" he asks before you even speak. You point to your left cheek, swollen now, and try not to wince too hard. Doc nods. "Sit." You sit. The chair creaks ominously. It's not a dentist's chair. It's a regular wooden chair with a rope tied around one armrest, presumably for people who try to escape mid-procedure. He doesn't offer you anaesthetic. What he offers you is a flask of something strong, sharp, and vaguely peach-scented. "Drink that," he says, handing it over. You drink. It burns its way down your throat like a wildfire and makes your eyes water instantly. Your vision goes blurry, your head feels fuzzy, and you begin to seriously question whether this was a good idea. But it's too late now. He's already rolling up his sleeve and pulling something from a drawer. It's a pair of tongs, not gleaming surgical steel, not precision tools, just tongs, blackened with age and soot, possibly previously used to handle firewood or roast meat. "Open up," he says. You hesitate. He taps your knee with the tongs gently but firmly. "Now." And so you open your mouth, and he leans in with the expertise of someone who's pulled teeth from humans, cows, and one time, according to town legend, a drunk bear. Here's your historical moment. Frontier dentistry was horrifying. Most doctors weren't trained. Dentist was a loose title handed out to anyone who owned tools and had a steady hand. Some barbers pulled teeth, some blacksmiths, some travelling salesmen who also sold soap and miracle tonics. There were no x-rays, no clean gloves, and certainly no sterile environments, just pain, bravery, and high alcohol tolerance. Doc Miller doesn't waste time. He finds the problem tooth, plants the tongs around it, and yanks. There's a sound, something between a crack and a squelch, that you will never forget. The pain is cosmic. A full-body experience that explodes through your spine and down into your boots. You might have blacked out for a second. You'll never be sure. When you come back to reality, Doc is holding the tooth between two fingers. "Got it," he says, and drops it into a metal dish with a clink. You glance down and see at least 5 other teeth in there. It's a collection, a trophy room. You try not to vomit. He pats your shoulder like a man who's just replaced a fence post, then stuffs a wad of cotton into your bleeding socket. "Don't spit too hard," he says, "or it'll bleed all night." You nod, eyes glassy. He hands you another swig of the mystery liquor. You take it. As you stagger out, jaw throbbing and slightly numb from trauma rather than medicine, you realise you've just survived one of the worst possible experiences on the frontier, and that's saying something. Your mouth tastes like blood and metal. Your head is spinning. Your hand is still shaking. Fun side fact. Some frontier folks tried to pull their own teeth. That's right. With string, knives, even bullet casings. One guy in a Montana mining camp famously pulled 4 of his own molars in one night, using nothing but pliers and a bottle of bourbon. He didn't walk straight for a week. He also became a local legend. You'll settle for person who didn't pass out in Doc Miller's chair. There's still debate among historians about how bad dental care truly was out here. Some argue that a rough, unprocessed diet kept cavities lower than expected. Others say malnutrition and poor hygiene led to constant infections and tooth loss. But one thing's for sure, when it hurt, it really hurt. You sit down on the saloon steps, dizzy, mouthful of cotton, and stare into the dusty street. You survived. You lost a tooth, possibly part of your soul, and definitely your faith in rustic medicine. But you're alive, and for now, that's enough. You're still reeling from your impromptu dental horror show, half drunk on whatever Doc Miller gave you, when you realise your only hope for comfort lies in the most unpredictable, chaotic, and questionably hygienic building in town, the Saloon. It's the closest thing to a social hub the West has to offer, and it's where people go to drink, argue, gamble, and occasionally get thrown through windows. You've avoided it until now, because you value your internal organs and prefer them to remain inside your body. But today, you need something cold, something strong, and maybe a dark corner to melt into. You step through the swinging doors, which creak dramatically because of course they do. Inside, the air is 10 degrees cooler than outside, but twice as thick with tobacco smoke, stale sweat, and the sour undertone of last night's regrets. It's dim, lit mostly by sunlight filtering through dirty windows and a few flickering oil lamps. The wooden floor is sticky. You try not to think about what made it that way. At the bar stands a man who looks like he was born behind it. Tall, rail-thin, sunburned in a permanent pattern that suggests he never removes his hat. He's polishing a glass with a rag that might be cleaner if he just dipped it in the horse trough outside. He glances up at you, takes in your swollen jaw, and doesn't even blink. Tooth? He asks. You nod painfully. He nods back and pours you something amber and angry-looking. First one's on the house. You look like you earned it. You take a sip and immediately regret it. It burns like liquid fire and tastes like someone distilled old fence posts and boot leather. But it does distract from the gaping hole in your gums, so... Success. Around you, the saloon hums with quiet tension. A few men lean over a poker table, their faces a mix of sun-scorched boredom and barely suppressed violence. A woman in a tattered green dress plucks out a tune on the upright piano, her fingers landing on the keys with the enthusiasm of someone who stopped caring a decade ago. She pauses to cough into her elbow and mutter something about ghost notes, then resumes the same four-chord loop. The piano has seen better days. One of its legs is propped up with stacked cards, and about a third of the keys don't work. Still, the sound fits the mood. Off-kilter, slightly threatening, and kind of drunk. You sip your drink slowly and survey the room. It's a rotating cast of familiar Western archetypes. There's a guy in a bowler hat cleaning his revolver while whistling. A grizzled old man asleep in the corner snoring into a pile of sawdust. Two women at a side table flipping coins and side-eyeing anyone who gets too close. It's equal parts theatre and survival. Historically speaking, the saloon was more than just a bar. It was the heart of the town, equal parts courthouse, dance hall, hotel, brothel, and sometimes jail. Deals were made, alliances formed, enemies declared, and all of it fueled by cheap liquor, dice, and an unspoken agreement that rules were optional after sundown. You shift on your stool, already regretting sitting. The bar stools have no backs, no cushions, and probably lice. Everything in here has lice. You're becoming increasingly aware that your body's both sticky and dusty, and that you may in fact have absorbed some of the floor into your skin. The bartender, whose name you learn is Walt, leans against the counter and watches the room like a man waiting for a fire to break out. He's got the kind of calm that only comes from having seen at least 2 men shot over card games and one thrown through the piano. He jerks his head toward the far corner. Careful with the tall guy in the vest, he cheats. You glance over and spot him, smiling too wide, eyes flicking constantly. His hands never stop moving. You nod back at Walt. Noted. Quirky frontier fact. Saloon pianists often carried weapons under the keys. Guns, knives, even hatchets. Why? Because when fights broke out, and they always did, the pianist was usually caught in the crossfire. Some even practiced playing one-handed just in case. You eye the woman at the piano and wonder what she's hiding under those dusty ivories. Probably something sharp. You finish your drink, still wincing with every swallow. The pain is duller now, either from the alcohol or because your nerves have decided to give up. You debate ordering another, but your stomach votes no. Hard pass. Instead, you shift your attention to the room. There's laughter in the back. Someone hits the table and yells, "Full house!" Chairs scrape. Voices rise. It's only a matter of time now. The energy changes, tightens, gets thinner, like the air before lightning strikes. Walt sighs. Here we go. One of the poker players stands, accusing the other of cheating. The accused denies it. Loudly. Then, of course, he goes for his gun. It all happens in half a second. You drop behind the bar instinctively, covering your head just as a shot cracks through the room. Screams erupt. The piano slams shut. Glass shatters. And Walt, still calm, ducks slightly and mutters, "Third time this week." The commotion dies almost as fast as it started. One man lies on the floor groaning, clutching his leg. The other is standing wide-eyed, pistol still shaking in his hand. Everyone freezes, waiting for someone else to move, but Walt steps out from behind the bar, grabs the pistol and shoves it into a drawer like he's shelving a spoon. "You two," he says to no one in particular, "clean that up." You peek over the bar, eyes wide. Welcome to your first saloon shootout. It's like dinner theatre, only the blood is real and the actors don't always get up afterward. This is normal, by the way. In many frontier towns, gunfights were just part of life, especially in places without strong law enforcement, which was most places. Historians debate how frequent they really were, but newspaper reports suggest a regular rhythm of bar fights escalating into bullet exchanges. Sometimes over money, sometimes over women, sometimes just because someone spilled a drink. You climb back onto your stool, heart still pounding, jaw still aching, and decide you've had enough of saloon culture for one day. You nod to Walt, who gives you a small, respectful nod back, like he's just witnessed your baptism by gunfire. Outside, the sun has started to dip. The sky glows orange and purple, and the breeze carries with it the distant sound of cattle, and maybe another gunshot. You don't even flinch this time. Congratulations, you've now survived your first visit to a Wild West saloon. You got booze, noise, trauma, and at least one piece of shrapnel embedded in your sleeve. A perfect 10. The sun's inching toward high noon now, and there's a buzz in the air that makes the hairs on your arms stand up, though that could just be the lingering effect of whatever was in that saloon whiskey. The piano's gone quiet, the street's gone still, and the townsfolk are suddenly more interested in their window shutters than your swollen jaw or the boot blister that's reached its final form. This eerie calm, it's not weather-related, it's duel time. You're sitting on a rickety bench outside the saloon, trying to decide if your body's ready for movement again, when you notice two men facing off in the middle of the road. No yelling, no dramatic speeches, just that slow, tense way of squaring up that says somebody's definitely about to get shot. One's in a dark vest and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, the other's got spurs that jingle ominously with every slow step forward. A small crowd gathers at a safe distance, peeking around corners and ducking behind barrels. You're one of them, mouth dry, heart doing a light jog in your chest. This is a proper frontier duel. No seconds, no referees, no countdowns. Just two guys with itchy trigger fingers and a mutual understanding that somebody probably called someone a cheat, or a liar, or maybe insulted the wrong horse. No one really knows what started it, but everyone agrees it's worth watching. They stop 10 paces apart. The street is nothing but silence, dust, and the creak of a badly hung sign overhead. A tumbleweed rolls dramatically between them, so perfectly timed it feels staged, like someone backstage said, "Cue plant." The tension is so thick it might actually be the first solid object you've felt all day. And then, in one blink-long moment, it happens. A flash, a boom, a puff of smoke. You flinch so hard your hat falls off. One man stumbles. The other stands still, arm extended, smoke curling from his barrel. The wounded man drops to one knee, gripping his side, a slow stain blooming beneath his fingers. There's no screaming, just a grunt like he expected this, like he's already done the math on how many days of bleeding that bullet will buy him. The standing man holsters his revolver, tips his hat to no one in particular and walks off. That's it. No police, no yelling, no dramatic monologue about justice. Just business as usual. You exhale slowly. This isn't a play, it's just Tuesday. Historically, gun duels like this weren't quite as common as Hollywood would have you believe, but they did happen, especially in towns without strong lawmen or clear rules. A lot of them weren't even duels in the formal sense. They were spontaneous, drunk-fueled reactions to bad hands of poker, or someone spitting the wrong way. Some historians argue the iconic 10 paces turn and fire duel was more fantasy than reality. What actually happened was usually messier, more chaotic, and involved fewer rules and more yelling. You, personally, are still stuck on how everyone went back to business so quickly. The wounded man, he's being half dragged, half walked into the doctor's office, where, if you remember correctly, the doctor is also the same man who yanked out your molar with barbecue tools. So, best of luck to him. The crowd disperses almost immediately. A woman claps her kid on the shoulder and says, "Well, back to laundry." You want to shout, "Is nobody else going to talk about what just happened?" But no one's listening. In this world, gunfire is just punctuation. You decide to walk, carefully, over to the spot where it happened. There's a smear of blood in the dirt and the scent of gunpowder still hanging in the hot air. You crouch down and pick up a spent shell. It's warm, small, and still smells of smoke. You don't know what you'll do with it, but it feels like a souvenir. Maybe you'll wear it as a necklace. Maybe you'll just throw it at your wall later and yell. While you're down there, a boy walks by with a broom nearly twice his size. He looks about 10 and already has the kind of deadpan expression that says he's cleaned up after more than one shootout. "My pa says if it's before noon, it don't count as murder," he offers, as he starts sweeping the blood into the street gutter. You blink. "Is that a real rule?" He shrugs. "Don't ask me. I just sweep." This is your quirky fact for the day. Some towns had unofficial dueling hours. No joke. Some places, like Tombstone or Dodge City, developed their own warped sense of etiquette. You didn't shoot people during Sunday service, you didn't start trouble during meal times, and if you had a score to settle, you waited until the sheriff wasn't looking, or until you were outside the city limits, where no one technically had to clean up after you. There's even ongoing debate among scholars about how these traditions formed. Were they built on old-world honour codes? Or did people just get tired of patching up saloon walls every time someone got mad? Whatever the reason, one thing's clear. Frontier justice had its own logic, and none of it cared whether you understood the rules or not. You head back to the boardwalk, shell still in your hand, and sit down again, eyes darting around just in case round 2 kicks off. Your jaw still aches, your boots still pinch, and now your nerves are completely frayed. You didn't even know you could sweat from your kneecaps until this very moment. But you're alive. For now. Walt the bartender steps outside and leans against the post beside you. He's sipping something from a dented tin cup. Probably not his first drink of the day. "Well," he says casually, "you made it past your first midday gunfight. That means you're either real lucky or real slow." You nod, unsure which is worse. "Best advice I can give," he says, tossing back the last of his drink. "Don't ever be the first to draw. And never ever play cards with a man who won't take off his gloves. You file that away under disturbingly specific advice and tip your hat." High noon fades into early afternoon. The town resumes its slow, dusty rhythm. Somewhere, a dog barks. Somewhere else, a chicken squawks like it's seen a ghost. You sit there quietly, heart rate finally levelling out, and realise something terrifying. You've still got the whole afternoon ahead of you. You figure it's finally time. You've seen people do it all morning. Tall, weather-worn types climbing up onto horses like it's as easy as breathing. They look so effortless, like they were born halfway into the saddle, one with the reins, master of all hooves and horizons. You've been avoiding it, putting it off, telling yourself there's no rush. But if you're going to survive even one full day out here, you'll need to prove, if only to yourself, that you can ride a horse, or at the very least sit on one without dying. You head toward the stables located just past the smithy, where the air smells like hot iron and old sweat. The stable itself is a wide wooden building with walls that lean slightly to the left, as if they've given up but haven't told the roof yet. A few horses flick their tails lazily in the midday heat, swatting away flies and looking, frankly, bored. You wish you could say the same for yourself. A man named Tucker runs the place. He's got a beard that starts somewhere near his collarbone and ends around his eyeballs. His shirt is mostly holes. He's leaning on a pitchfork and chewing something that might be tobacco or tree bark. "You ride?" he asks without looking up. You pause. There's no right answer to this question. If you say yes, he'll hand you the reins and expect you not to die. If you say no, he'll laugh and then hand you the reins anyway. You go with cautious optimism. Not recently. Tucker grunts, which might mean he respects your honesty, or that he's planning your funeral. "Pick one that won't throw you," he says, gesturing toward the open pen. You walk along the fence, eyeing your options. One is enormous, black as night, with nostrils flaring like it's offended by your existence. Pass. Another is lying down entirely, possibly dead. Also pass. Then there's a chestnut mare with a calm expression and a missing ear. Perfect. She looks like she's seen some things and no longer cares. A horse after your own heart. You point. "Her." Tucker nods. "Her name's Mildred. Don't look her in the eye when you get on." Good start. He saddles her up with a series of straps, loops and buckles that all seem designed to confuse you. When it's finally done, he steps back, arms crossed. "Well?" You approach Mildred slowly, cautiously, like you're greeting a stranger you might have to fight later. She watches you with one eye and flicks her tail in a way that feels vaguely threatening. You reach for the stirrup, plant your foot and hoist yourself up. Sort of. You get about halfway before your boot slips, your knee buckles, and you slide back down like wet spaghetti. Tucker doesn't say a word. He just spits and waits. Round 2. You try again, this time with a running start. Bad idea. You misjudge the angle, launch yourself too high, and land stomach first across the saddle like a sack of potatoes having a midlife crisis. Mildred snorts. Tucker sighs audibly. Eventually, by sheer luck and maybe divine intervention, you manage to sit upright. You are now technically on a horse, and that's when you realise the horse is very tall, the ground is very far, and the saddle, it's not comfortable. It's a cruel leather wedge designed to turn your inner thighs into rawhide. Your legs dangle awkwardly. Your spine is already screaming. You don't feel powerful. You feel like a meat popsicle clinging to a moving animal. Tucker hands you the reins. Just let her walk. Don't pull nothing unless you want to go flying. Mildred starts to move, slowly, very slowly. You wobble like a top-heavy scarecrow, holding the horn of the saddle with both hands and praying gravity forgets you exist. The gentle up and down motion of her walk is oddly jarring, less majestic prairie freedom and more slow-motion whiplash. You make it about 20 feet before your knees start to shake and your hips feel like they're being unscrewed from the inside. You try adjusting your position. Big mistake. Your foot slips again, you lurch forward, and now your face is about 6 inches from Mildred's neck. She stops. She waits. She hates you, you can tell. Historically, horseback riding was a skill you learned young, or not at all. Children as young as 5 were put on ponies and expected to hang on or walk home. If you didn't grow up doing it, it wasn't something you picked up easily. Horses weren't pets. They were transportation, tools, even weapons. And if you couldn't ride, you walked. A lot. Which, as you've discovered, is also a form of slow torture in the West. Quirky fact for you. Some riders used to coat their saddles with lard to make long rides less miserable. It helped with chafing, but made for a slippery situation. Others padded their saddles with sheep wool or even corn husks. You currently have none of those, just raw leather and whatever hope remains between your tailbone and the grace of God. You try turning the horse. She does not agree. You tug gently on the left rein. She goes right. You try right. She stops. You make a small tisk noise that you think sounds authoritative. She sneezes. Eventually Tucker takes pity on you and walks alongside, leading the horse back to the fence. You dismount, more accurately slide off, and hit the ground with all the coordination of a burlap sack full of wet laundry. Your knees buckle. Your thighs scream. Your dignity files for divorce. Well, Tucker says, you didn't fall. That's better than most. You want to thank him, but your legs no longer work. You hobble back toward town with what might be the world's most awkward gait. Every step rubs somewhere that shouldn't be rubbed. You now understand why cowboys walk like their knees never fully bend. It's not swagger, it's survival. There's still debate among historians about how comfortable riding actually was. Some say it was second nature to most men and women of the frontier, as normal as breathing. Others argue that it was always unpleasant, just necessary. Based on your current condition, you're strongly leaning toward team pain. You finally make it to your porch, sit down slowly and contemplate your next move. You've lost a tooth, nearly witnessed a murder, and now your thighs are 2 pulled pork sandwiches held together by a pair of dusty pants. It's only mid-afternoon. You pat yourself down, hoping to find something, comfort perhaps, or an excuse to never ride again. Instead, you find a pebble in your sock. Of course, the final insult. And you know the worst part, you'll probably have to do it all again tomorrow. So you've proven you can more or less cling to a horse without immediately dying, which, by local standards, qualifies you for employment. That's right, it's time to find a job, or at least a way to not starve next week. Because out here in the Wild West, there's no safety net, no unemployment line, no friendly HR manager offering dental. There's just work, dirt, and people who expect you to be grateful for either. You head back into town with your legs still doing that post-horse waddle, which makes you look like someone who's just discovered walking again after a mysterious thigh-related injury. The townsfolk don't even blink. They've seen worse. Probably been worse. Your first stop is the blacksmith shop. It's the loudest building in town, metal on metal, fire roaring, hammer strikes ringing out like aggressive church bells for the Church of Blistered Hands. Inside, the temperature jumps 30 degrees. It smells like sweat, soot, and something faintly metallic that might just be the blacksmith himself. You see him. Bare arms, beard like a thundercloud, swinging a hammer with the kind of power that makes your spine instinctively straighten. This is Lyle. Lyle does not mess around. He glances up as you enter. You want work, he says, without even pausing mid-swing. Yeah, you stammer, already sweating. I can try. He nods at a pile of horseshoes. Cool. Start bending those into shape. That forge is hot. Try not to catch fire. That is apparently the entire interview. You approach the anvil like it might bite. You pick up a hammer that feels like a cinder block with a handle and try to lift it one-handed. Your arm trembles. You swing it. The horseshoe doesn't bend so much as insult you. The vibration from the impact rattles up through your wrist and into your teeth. Well, into the spaces where your teeth used to be. After 5 minutes, you're drenched. After 10, your hands are raw. After 15, Lyle walks over, inspects your work, which looks like someone tried to fold a waffle iron, and grunts. You're not cut out for this. You don't disagree. You leave with your pride scorched and one eyebrow singed. Next stop, the livery. You figure if you can sort of sit on a horse, maybe you can handle brushing one. That's all it is, right? Just brushing? You're wrong. So wrong. Old Man Tucker waves you over. You want to help muck out the stalls, he asks, already handing you a shovel. You nod. Why not? You've done worse today. Then he points to the stalls, and you realise just how much horses can produce. You step inside and it hits you like a wall. Heat, ammonia, damp hay, and the unmistakable aroma of equine digestive success. You get to work. It's not hard, technically, but it's humbling. You shovel, haul, dump, repeat. Sweat pours from you in buckets. You get hay stuck in your shirt. One horse sneezes in your face. Another kicks the wall near your head. It's like a very smelly version of dodgeball with less winning and more manure. An hour in, your arms are trembling, your boots are soaked with something you refuse to name, and your back feels like someone replaced your spine with a poorly tensioned banjo string. You drop the shovel, lean against the door, and Tucker just gives you that same nod. You'll live. You don't feel alive. You feel like a crusty version of your former self. Still, not wanting to quit yet, you stumble into the general store and ask the owner, Mrs. Everly, if she needs help. She looks you up and down like you've just crawled out of a swamp, which, to be fair, you basically have. I suppose you can carry flour, she says, and that's how you find yourself hauling 50-pound sacks of grain from the back storeroom to the front. Over and over, no cart, no wheelbarrow, just your arms, your legs, and whatever emotional support your dusty hat can provide. Somewhere around sack number 7, you black out for a moment. Not from heat stroke, just existential despair. You finally collapse onto a bench, gasping, sweat pouring down your back like warm molasses. Your entire body is shaking. Your muscles feel like they've been pickled. You've lost track of how many times you said "I'm fine" today while clearly not being fine. Here's the real kicker. You're not even getting paid yet. Most jobs out here don't pay by the hour. They pay by the day. Or worse, the week. And sometimes it's not even in money. Sometimes it's in supplies. A bar of soap, a few nails, maybe half a sack of beans if your boss is feeling generous. Fun historical fact, most cowhands and labourers out west earned about $25 to $40 a month. And that's assuming they didn't die, get robbed, or accidentally get trampled by the livestock they were wrangling. That's less than $2 a day to risk your life in heat, dust and boots that fit like punishment. And if you were thinking about a career, good luck. There were no promotions, no 401ks and no days off. If you got injured, you rested. If you didn't heal, you were done. That was it. Odd side note for the day. One of the highest paying jobs out west, grave digger. Morbid? Yes. But they were always in demand, rarely argued with customers, and didn't need to work quickly, just thoroughly. You briefly consider this, but you're not quite ready to dig holes for a living. Not yet. Historians still debate whether life on the frontier was about freedom, or just a slow, dusty grind of endurance. Some argue it was an opportunity for reinvention. Others say it was mostly just survival, dressed up in boots and bravado. Today, you're leaning hard toward grind. The only thing you're reinventing is new ways to sweat. As the sun dips a little lower, you limp back to your shack, sore, filthy, and so tired that even your eyelids ache. You collapse onto the rickety bed without even taking off your boots. You physically can't. Your legs no longer lift that high. Congratulations, you've officially worked a day in the Wild West, and somehow you're still broke. By the time your stomach growls again, it's late afternoon, and the sun has done its job of turning everything you touch, including your own skin, into a warm, brittle version of itself. You've survived blacksmithing, horse wrangling, shovel hauling, and general despair, and now your body is politely but firmly demanding food. Real food. Unfortunately, this is the Wild West, and real food isn't really a thing. You shuffle into your shack, sit on the bed like it might dissolve under you, and take inventory of your supplies. One hunk of jerky that could double as a shiv, a sad cloth sack of beans, and 2 slices of bread so dry they could be used as roofing shingles. There's also a small tin of lard, a little container of salt, and the half-burned onion you forgot you owned. It's basically an episode of a very depressing cooking show. You grab your tin plate, scrape off whatever was crusted onto it from breakfast, beans, always beans, and start assembling what may loosely be called lunch. First up, the bread. You bang it against the table to test its structural integrity. Yep, still edible adjacent. You break it in half, barely, and set it aside. Then you slice off a bit of the jerky, gnawing it carefully because your mouth is still tender from the traumatic tooth extraction. It tastes like regret and smoked regret. You chew it for a full 2 minutes before it even begins to soften. You're not convinced this came from a cow. Could be elk, could be boot leather, could be the same jerky that's been passed around this town since the Civil War. You light a small fire and toss the chopped onion into a dented pan with a dab of lard. The smell that hits your nose is somewhere between savoury and suspicious. You stir it with your only spoon, bent, blackened and slightly forked at the tip, and sprinkle a little salt on top like you're auditioning for a cooking competition no one wants to watch. You toss in some beans, unsoaked, unboiled, and fully aware of their rebellion against your digestive system, and hope the laird can coax some flavour out of them. Spoiler, it can't. But it makes them hot, and that's something. You sit cross-legged on the floor eating your crunchy half-cooked beans and burnt onion like it's some kind of rustic delicacy. The bread softens a bit from the heat of the pan, enough that your teeth don't scream quite as loudly. You take small bites, chew carefully, and wash everything down with a splash of tepid water that's taken on a mysterious leafy flavour. Congratulations, you're eating a frontier lunch. It's not good, but it's calories. And really that's all that matters out here. Calories. Historically, meals on the frontier were dictated by what was cheap, non-perishable and impossible to ruin. Beans, salt pork, flour, lard, coffee and dried fruit were staples. Meat, when available, came from whatever you could shoot or trade for. Rabbit, venison, squirrel, maybe even snake if things got desperate, and they often did. Vegetables? Forget it. Fresh produce was a luxury that rotted fast, attracted bugs, and wasn't worth the risk of bartering with the travelling salesman who sold cabbage that looked suspiciously like weeds. And the bread you just ate. That's hardtack's slightly more optimistic cousin. Hardtack was a flour and water biscuit baked until it had the consistency of tile. Some folks softened it in stew, others used it to fix broken table legs. You did your best. You survived. Here's a quirky historical tidbit. Some frontiersmen made coffee by throwing a handful of grounds directly into boiling water, then dropping an eggshell in to help settle the grounds. Others skipped the eggshell and just spat out the grit like tough guys. One particularly stubborn cowboy reportedly brewed his coffee with water he'd used to wash his socks, claiming it gave it extra flavour. You suddenly feel grateful for your leaf-flavoured water. As you scrape the last bean from the pan and lick your fingers with a bit too much desperation, you reflect on the fact that food out here isn't about enjoyment. It's about energy, fuel, eating to keep moving. Nobody's writing recipes, nobody's staging fancy dinners, nobody's posting sourdough starters on social media. And yet, you feel oddly accomplished. You cooked a meal without burning down your shack. You managed not to chip another tooth. You even seasoned it slightly. That's got to count for something. Still, your stomach is already debating whether this counts as food or just a temporary distraction. You know what's coming. The slow ache, the gurgle, the bloated fatigue. Frontier meals aren't just disappointing, they're risky. If the beans weren't fully cooked, you're in for a long, noisy night. There's an open, scholarly debate among food historians about how much nutritional knowledge frontier folk had. Some say settlers were surprisingly good at balanced diets, when they had access to variety. Others argue malnutrition was rampant, and folks didn't make the connection between what they ate and why their teeth fell out by 35. Judging by your current state of bloated confusion, you'd say the second camp has a point. You set the tin plate aside, wipe your hands on your pants, again, and lean back against the wall. The meal has filled the void in your stomach, but not in your soul. You close your eyes for a second and try to imagine a real lunch. Maybe a sandwich with actual cold meat, a crisp apple, maybe some juice that didn't taste like a wooden barrel. But nope. You open your eyes, and it's still beans, still dust, still heat. Outside, the town is moving slow. Most people retreat indoors in this part of the day, waiting out the worst of the sun before venturing back into their chores, or conflicts, or whatever fresh misery the evening brings. You join them curling up on your bed, letting your body cool down and your food settle. You feel tired. Not the kind of tired you fix with a nap. The kind that comes from a dozen little losses over the course of a day. Bad food, aching muscles, itchy clothes, sore teeth, sunburnt skin. A slow grind. A whisper in your brain that says, This again tomorrow. Still, you did it. You ate. You didn't burn the place down. You didn't die choking on a stale biscuit. In frontier math, that's a win. And maybe, just maybe, dinner will be better. You've eaten, sort of. You've hydrated, mostly. You've bled a little, cried internally more than once. And now, as the sun dips lower in the sky, the heat does something strange. It gets worse. You didn't think it was possible. But the entire town seems to bake in its own dust, every surface radiating heat like a cast-iron skillet that's just had a bad day. You lean back against the side of your shack and feel the warmth seep into your shirt like a personal slow roast. Everything is covered in dust. Everything. Your boots, your hat, the spoon you cleaned 3 times. Even the beans you cooked earlier had a little crunch from the air seasoning. Your fingers leave trails on every surface they touch. Windowsills, table edges, even your own skin. You wipe your forehead with a sleeve and leave behind a streak of grime like war paint. You're not sweating anymore. Not really. You've passed that phase. Now it's more like slow dehydration by air. Dust, you quickly realise, is not just a substance out here. It's a way of life, a philosophy, a quiet, ever-present menace. You breathe it, you eat it, you wear it. It's in your eyelashes, your ears, your socks, and somehow your teeth again, even though you brushed with charcoal this morning and lost a whole tooth for the trouble. You step off the porch to shake out your shirt. Bad idea. The wind picks up at that exact moment, and you're immediately slapped in the face with a miniature sandstorm. Your eyes slam shut, your mouth fills with grit, and your shirt turns into a sail that nearly yanks you sideways. You stumble back, spitting out what tastes like sandy flour and old fence post, and vow, again, to never take clean air for granted. Historically, this level of dust wasn't just annoying, it was deadly. Entire regions of the American West suffered through what were essentially proto-Dust Bowl conditions, long before the big one hit in the 1930s. Settlers spoke of dust storms blotting out the sun, of walls rattling, of children going missing in the fog of dirt. That ever-so-charming dust layer on your table? In some homes, it accumulated thick enough to leave footprints. No one called it health hazard, they just called it Tuesday. And here's a fun fringe fact. People used to cover their food, not with lids, but with cloth soaked in vinegar or molasses to trap the dust, as if that would stop it. They also tied scarves over their faces, stuffed cracks in walls with newspaper, and nailed blankets over their windows. You start seriously considering wrapping your entire head in your undershirt. Even the animals are annoyed. A chicken down the road is making aggressive "I hate this" noises, scratching at the dry earth with frantic little kicks, like she's trying to dig her way to somewhere wetter. A horse stomps and huffs in its pen, tail flicking in a slow-motion war with the flies that, somehow, like the dust. You watch as a pig rolls over in a trough, grunts once, and seems to give up on life altogether. Your own eyes start to itch. You rub them with the back of your hand, which is a mistake, because your hand is covered in the same dust you're trying to remove. It's like exfoliating your corneas with a cheese grater. You blink furiously and try not to panic. You rinse your face with a splash of lukewarm water, and for a second, just a second, you feel human again. Until the wind kicks up again. You dart back inside your shack, slamming the door shut behind you. Dust still seeps in through the cracks, of course. It's not a door so much as loosely assembled planks, hoping no one looks too closely. You look around your space and notice that even your bed has acquired a fine layer of filth. You brush it off. It floats into the air like toxic fairy dust and settles again as soon as you exhale. You think about cleaning. You really do. But what's the point? You wipe a shelf, turn your back, and within seconds it's like you never touched it. Dust wins. Always. It's the silent king of the frontier, and you are its humble, gritty servant. Here's the debate historians still chew on like stale biscuits. Was it this bad for everyone? Some argue that homes were kept cleaner than we give them credit for. Brooms made of straw, rugs beaten with sticks, furniture polished with oil and determination. Others say that the constant struggle just wore people down, that you could clean, but it wouldn't last, that you could try to scrub the walls, but they'd just collect more soot and horsehair the next day. The truth, like most things out here, probably lives somewhere in the dust cloud in between. You decide to sweep, because what else are you going to do? You grab your broom, a bundle of twigs tied to a stick with twine, and start moving the dirt around the floor. You know you're not removing anything. You're just relocating the debris, from the middle of the room to the corners, from under the bed to behind the stove. It's performative at best. Still, you do it. And for a minute you feel better, cleaner, almost normal. Then a dust devil forms right outside your door. Just spins up from nowhere, like some kind of nature-powered insult. It kicks dirt against your shack like a child throwing pebbles. You can hear it whirling, roaring, dragging twigs and tumbleweeds and bad vibes with it. You freeze, broom in hand, and whisper to no one, "Not today." The wind dies down eventually, leaving behind silence and yet more dust. You sit on your bed, panting from sweeping and existential dread, and try not to cough. You fail. A short burst of hacking leaves you doubled over, tears leaking from the corners of your gritty eyes. You lie back. You stare at the ceiling. Even that has dust. How is that possible? You reach over, grab your canteen and take another drink of tepid water. It tastes vaguely like burlap now. You can't remember if that's new or if your tongue is just permanently coated. But the real kicker? You'll wake up tomorrow and do this again. The dust will still be there. It's always there. Settling quietly, invisibly, patiently, like it's waiting for you to give up trying. You roll onto your side, mutter something rude about nature, and close your eyes for a minute. Just a minute. The quiet doesn't last. It never does. Just when you start to drift into that twilight state between heat exhaustion and emotional collapse, a gunshot cracks through the stillness. You jolt upright, heart punching your ribs like it's trying to escape. You listen. 1 second, 2, and there it is again. Another sharp bang, followed by the unmistakable sound of boots pounding dirt and someone yelling, "He went that way!" You leap to your feet, instantly regretting the movement. Your back pops, your knees threaten a coup, and your brain is still somewhere back near the pillow. But adrenaline doesn't care. It grabs your limbs and drags you to the front door. You pull it open and peer out, squinting into the golden haze of the late afternoon. The town is alive. Not the usual sluggish hum, but a chaotic, high-energy buzz. People rushing to windows, peering from behind barrels, some just standing with crossed arms and amused expressions like, "Ah, this again." You step out and flag down the nearest local, a teenage girl chewing on a stick of licorice like she's watching a stage show. "What happened?" you ask. "Someone robbed the post office," she says, not looking at you. "Sheriff's mad. Someone said it was the Henderson boy, but I think it was that drifter in the yellow vest. Or both. Or maybe just a squirrel. Honestly, no one knows." You blink. "The post office?" She nods, still watching the action. "Took the mailbag and ran like he was on fire. Now they're forming a posse." You turn slowly. Sure enough, a cluster of townsfolk is gathering near the sheriff's office. There's the sheriff, Sheriff Thompson, leaning against the porch post with a rifle in one hand and a grimace in the other. You walk over cautiously. Sheriff Thompson is 72, wears glasses thicker than your boots, and has a limp that seems to alternate legs depending on the day. His badge is crooked, and his gun has a noticeable amount of dust on it, as if it hasn't been fired since the last leap year. He's not what you'd call an enforcer of justice. He's more like a mascot for the concept. Still, he's all you've got. "Sheriff," you say, tipping your hat politely. He squints at you. "You want in?" You blink. "On what?" "The posse." He jerks a thumb toward the 4 men and 1 woman already saddling up. "We're going after the thief." You glance at the others. They look serious, determined, like they've done this before. You, on the other hand, have recently been defeated by beans, boots, a horse, and a mild breeze. "I don't have a horse," you say. He shrugs. "Borrow one. Or ride double." You consider your options. On one hand, staying behind means safety, relative quiet, and probably more beans. On the other hand, joining the posse might finally earn you some respect in this town, or get you shot, but hey, at least that'd be something new. "All right," you say, before your brain can stop your mouth. "I'm in." Sheriff Thompson claps you on the back. You nearly fall off the porch. Here's your historical fact for the day. Many frontier towns had only one lawman, and he often relied on citizen posses to do the heavy lifting. Formal police departments were rare. Justice was improvised. Posse members were neighbours, friends, sometimes just people who happened to be nearby. No training, no rules, just hope and a vague sense of vengeance. And quirky detail? Some posses rode out with wanted posters in hand, pointing at the sketch like it was GPS. Never mind that the drawing looked like every man in the West. Wide-brimmed hat, scowl, moustache. Still, it gave them a target and a sense of purpose. You borrow a horse from Tucker, Mildred again, because she's the only one who doesn't actively try to bite you. She seems irritated to be involved, but not surprised. You can relate. You climb into the saddle with minimal flailing, and the posse sets off. 5 horses clop down the main road, stirring up a trail of dust as dramatic as any movie scene. You're in the back, praying your thighs don't cramp again. The sheriff leads, eyes squinting into the horizon, and here's where things get vague. "Where are we going?" you ask the rider beside you, a tall man named Elias who hasn't spoken yet. "South," he says, "maybe west." "Any idea who we're chasing?" "Someone with a mailbag." That's all the info you're getting. You ride. The sun starts to dip lower. The air cools, but the tension heats up. There's something about the pace, the dust, the vague promise of action that feels almost heroic. Almost. Because about an hour later, Mildred stops walking. Just stops. She's done. You nudge her. Nothing. You try again. She snorts and turns her head to look at you like, "You serious right now?" The posse keeps riding ahead. You wave awkwardly. "Horse trouble," you shout. So they don't stop, but you dismount, lead her to a patch of shade and sit beside her, panting. You're lost, alone, abandoned by your backup transportation, and still unsure who stole what, but at least you're not in town being judged. Posse work, you're starting to realise, is less about justice and more about drama. Historians debate whether these frontier posses actually accomplished much. Some did, many didn't. Most just rode out, wandered around, scared some wildlife, and rode back with a story. The point wasn't always to catch the guy, it was to try. And here you are, trying. You sit back, hat tipped low, chewing on a blade of grass that tastes like old wagon wheels, watching the horizon just in case the real West decides to show you something. Maybe the sheriff will find the thief. Maybe he won't. Maybe this was all a distraction from the dust. Either way, you've earned your badge, even if it's imaginary. You return to town just after sunset, sore, horse-sick, and entirely posse-less. No one waited. No one came back for you. You and Mildred limped home alone, 2 disgruntled survivors of an adventure that never really happened. The thief, whoever he was, is long gone. Maybe he's halfway to the next town by now, sitting smugly on a stolen sack of mail, reading someone else's love letter, and wondering if he can pawn a bunch of grain invoices. Meanwhile, you're dragging your boots through the dirt, hat drooping, heart bruised, and dignity held together by 3 threadbare thoughts. You're almost to your shack when it happens. You feel a bump, then a hand in your coat pocket. You freeze, twist, spin. Too late. There's a kid, maybe 12, maybe 10, definitely chewing something sticky and grinning like the devil, bolting away from you, arms pumping, one fist clutching your only remaining coin purse. You stand there stunned, watching your last bit of frontier wealth bounce away into the shadows. "Hey!" you shout, but it comes out more as a pathetic wheeze than a roar. The kid turns mid-sprint and calls back, "Thanks, city slicker." Then he's gone, disappeared behind a stack of barrels and through an alley like a feral ghost in suspenders. You don't chase him. You want to. But your legs are jelly. Your boot has started rubbing the exact same blister you already had, and your soul just doesn't have the motivation anymore. You lean against the nearest post and exhale so hard it stirs the dust around your knees. Robbed. By a child. A sticky, shoeless, possibly toothless child. You slump onto the porch step and take inventory of your losses. 1 coin purse, 1 ego, 1 last shred of belief that today might turn around. You look up at the stars, not because you're feeling poetic, but because they're the only thing that hasn't actively tried to ruin your life in the past 8 hours. A few townsfolk pass by and give you sympathetic nods. This isn't unusual, apparently. Frontier towns were breeding grounds for young opportunists, kids who learned early that there was no such thing as a safety net. No schools, no daycare, no bedtime stories, just survival and clever fingers. Most of them worked, helping on farms, sweeping floors, mucking stalls, but a few found quicker ways to make a living. Historically, pickpocketing was a real problem in frontier settlements. Children were often involved, not because they were naturally criminal, though that grin sure said otherwise, but because they were ignored, overlooked, underestimated. The perfect storm. Some even worked in teams. One to distract, one to steal, one to run. You suspect you just met Team Run. The worst part? He probably didn't even need the money. He probably just wanted to see if he could do it. And he did. Perfectly. Here's your weird fringe fact of the day. In some towns, they actually had local kids trained as pickpockets by lawmen. Not to steal for real, but to test the townsfolk. A sort of frontier security system. If you can't catch a 9-year-old lifting your pocket, you don't deserve that wallet. Or so the logic went. Of course, most of those kids trained themselves right into real crime, because once you know how to take something, why stop? You're still fuming when the sheriff walks by, chewing on a piece of jerky and whistling something tuneless. "Sheriff," you shout, rising from the step with the urgency of a man who's just had enough. He glances over. "You're alive," he says. "Didn't think we'd see you again." "I got robbed," you say, pointing down the alley. "By a child?" Sheriff Thompson raises an eyebrow. "Was it the little one with the red cap?" You pause. "Yeah," he nods. "That's Otis. He's good." "That's it?" you ask, arms flailing now. "He's good?" "Better than most men I know," he shrugs. "Besides, he only takes from folks who won't miss it." You gape. "That was everything I had." The sheriff considers this. "Then you probably shouldn't have been carrying it around." And just like that, he keeps walking. You sit back down, stunned into silence. You've officially been outmatched by a child and philosophically dismissed by a lawman in a single sentence. You let out a sigh so deep it might qualify as a prayer. There's a little boy across the street watching you, maybe 6. He lifts a stick in salute like he's paying tribute to your defeat. You salute back. Might as well earn some respect from the youth class. And here comes the scholarly debate to rub some salt in your wound. Some historians argue that these frontier towns were more community-based than we think, that folks looked out for each other, helped the less fortunate, shared meals. Others point to crime records, vigilante justice, and anecdotal chaos as proof that it was every person for themselves. You're leaning hard into the chaos camp right now, because you just got fleeced and the sheriff congratulated your thief. Back inside your shack, you flop down on your cot. The springs creak like a warning, and dust puffs up in small ghosts. You stare at the ceiling and imagine what that kid's doing now. Counting your coins, buying licorice, starting his own gambling ring. You reach into your other pocket, nothing, empty, not even lint. It's almost impressive. You think about trying to sleep, but you're still too angry. Not the explosive kind of angry, just the defeated kind. The kind that simmers behind your eyes and makes you question every life choice that led you here, especially the one where you thought the Wild West would be a simpler life. You've learned a hard truth today. There's always someone faster, sneakier, and smaller than you. And sometimes they're sticky-fingered urchins who know how to vanish between water barrels. You laugh a little against your will, just a dry, dusty chuckle. Because what else can you do? You got robbed by a child, and no one's surprised but you. You don't sleep that night. Not really. You lie on your lumpy excuse for a mattress, listening to the creaking of old wood, the scratching of rodents in the rafters, and the occasional wind-blown whisper of the town shifting in its sleep. But your mind won't shut off. Every time your eyelids droop, you see that smug little thief's face again, grinning, coin purse in hand, running off like he's the mayor of Mischiefville. You toss, you turn, you plot elaborate revenge scenarios that mostly involve glue, a rope, and a wagon wheel. Eventually, somewhere between your 4th and 5th revenge fantasy, you doze off. For maybe 20 minutes. You wake up to the sound of something brushing against your door. Not knocking, not scratching, brushing. Like a slow, dry rustle. You sit up, every muscle in your body immediately reminding you of the things you did yesterday, particularly the horse-related ones. You wince. You shuffle over to the door. You open it slowly. There, on the porch, staring at you with deadpan disinterest, is a snake. A rattlesnake. It's coiled half on, half off the wooden planks, head lifted slightly, tongue flicking. Its tail buzzes once, just enough to say, "I'm not in the mood." But I could be you freeze. It freezes. For a brief second, you and the snake are having a conversation in absolute silence. The topic: how fast can you run in boots? You slowly shut the door, you back away. "Okay," you whisper to no one. "We live here now." You pace, you sit, you grab your boot, your one weapon in reach, and hold it like a club. You consider throwing something out the window to scare it off, but the only thing you've got is your spoon, and you need that for survival. So instead, you wait, and wait, and eventually you don't hear anything. Cautiously, you open the door again. It's gone. This should be a relief, but somehow it's worse, because now you don't know where it is. You step outside and look both ways like you're crossing a busy street. No snake in sight. But the paranoia has rooted itself deep in your chest. Every stick, every rustle, every passing tumbleweed now has a sinister, snaky undertone. You head toward the well, needing water, still jumpy, eyes darting to every shadow, and that's when you nearly step on a Gila monster. That's right. The thick, slow-moving lizard that looks like it was designed by someone who really wanted to ruin your morning. It just lies there in the dust, beady eyes blinking, tail curled like a sleeping sausage. You freeze again, muscles locking up like a broken trap. It doesn't move, it just stares. You're not sure if it's poisonous, venomous, or just grumpy, but you're not about to find out. You back away. Again. Slowly. Like you're in some Wild West version of a nature documentary titled Things That Would Like You Dead or Dying. Historically, snakes and venomous creatures were a genuine daily threat on the frontier. Rattlesnakes were everywhere. Under porches, in boots, behind water barrels. Settlers learned early to shake out their shoes, keep bedrolls off the ground, and always carry a stick when walking through tall grass. Bites were common. Anti-venom was not. Your treatment options included whiskey, screaming, or amputation, if you were lucky enough to have a very confident neighbour with a sharp saw. And then there were the myths, old cowboy tales about cutting X's into the wound, sucking out the venom, or rubbing it with chewed tobacco. None of these worked, but they kept people busy while they waited to either get better or get buried. As for the Gila monster, real creature, real venom, moves slow, bites hard, and doesn't let go. And yes, they lived out here. Sometimes people tried to keep them as pets, because frontier logic is just built different. You finally reach the well, still rattled, and draw a bucket of water with a hand that won't stop trembling. You take a long drink and sit on the edge of the trough, staring down the road like a man who's seen too much in too little time, and that's when you realise your boot is wet. Not damp, wet. You look down, there's a frog in your boot. A frog. You don't even scream. You just remove the boot, set it down, and walk away barefoot into the dust, muttering to yourself. Nope, not today. No more surprises. But surprises are what the West does. There's a boy nearby, the same kid who saluted you yesterday, watching you with wide eyes. That's the boot frog, he says. He lives there now. Great, you say, rubbing your temple. Tell him rent's due next week. You return to your shack, boot in hand, and sit on the porch. The boot frog leaps out and disappears into the brush, presumably to report back to the Snake Council. You dump the rest of the water out, inspect your other boot, and shake it violently, just in case it's become a wildlife hostel too. There's debate among scholars about whether the fear of snakes and critters on the frontier was exaggerated. Some suggest settlers learned to coexist with nature, understanding its rhythms and respecting its boundaries. Others point to diaries and letters filled with stories of close encounters, sudden bites, and horrible deaths. You're now firmly on the everything's trying to kill me team. You lean back, hat tipped over your face, trying to calm your heartbeat. But the truth is, you're on edge. Every corner might hide fangs, every shoe could be rented out to an amphibian. You miss floors, you miss screens, you miss a world where creatures didn't surprise you. But this is the West, and out here, the wildlife is less peaceful nature and more armed standoff. Still you survived. Again. Just, maybe next time, check your boots before you put them on. You're still recovering from your near-death reptilian encounters when you remember, oh right, you were planning to send a letter home. Remember letters? Those things with paper, pens, and your rapidly disappearing literacy skills. You'd promised to write weeks ago, just something short. Still alive. Mostly. Stop. Dust everywhere. Stop. Pray for me. Stop. So with the kind of mental exhaustion usually reserved for people fleeing natural disasters, you dig around in your crate of personal effects and find your one sheet of paper. It's wrinkled, a little water-stained, and smells faintly of beans. Perfect. You pull out your stub of a pencil, blunt, chewed on the end, basically a sad wooden reminder that even communication is hard here, and sit down to write. You pause. What do you even say? Dear friends and family, I've spent the last 3 days losing teeth, riding feral furniture disguised as horses, and being robbed by children. Love, me. That feels honest, but also like a cry for help. You scribble something vague. Doing well. Town is lively. Still adjusting. Miss you all lies, but they sound nice. You fold the letter, stuff it into a slightly mouldy envelope, and step outside to head to the post office, still shaken from the memory of yesterday's robbery. You're not sure it even has a door anymore after the whole mail heist situation, but at least it's technically functional. The post office is one of the oldest buildings in town, which is saying something, because everything here looks like it was built during a particularly chaotic week in the 1800s, by people with no tools and lots of whiskey. The sign above the door reads Post in faded, half-missing paint, and there's a pigeon nesting in the top right corner, eyeing you like it's part of the security staff. Inside, the building is empty except for the smell of dried glue, sun-baked wood, and whatever's slowly rotting behind the wall. The postmaster, an elderly man with hair like cobwebs and a face that belongs on a weathered coin, looks up from his desk. He squints. "Help you?" "I need to send this," you say, holding out the letter like it's fragile. He takes it with a gnarled hand, inspects it as if it might be counterfeit, then grunts and walks over to a small set of pigeonholes filled with other letters, packages, and what looks suspiciously like a wheel of cheese. 2 weeks, he says flatly. You blink. 2 weeks to send it. He shrugs. Could be 3, depends on the riders, and the weather, and if the trail bandits are feeling peaceful. You stare. Is there any way to make it go faster? He raises an eyebrow. You could take it yourself. But then who would I blame when it doesn't get there? Fair point. Welcome to the glorious age of frontier communication. Everything moves at the speed of hope. You drop a coin into the wooden tray, your backup coin, hidden from pickpockets, which now feels like your last tie to the civilized world, and walk back out wondering if your letter will arrive before the next full moon. Historically, the mail system in the Old West was a marvel of ambition and disaster. Riders carried mail across vast stretches of wilderness, facing everything from weather to ambushes to plain old boredom. The Pony Express, legendary and short-lived, only operated for about 18 months. Romanticised in every Western ever, but in truth, it was gruelling, dangerous, and wildly inefficient. Letters got lost, delayed, opened by nosy riders, eaten by horses, or just disappeared. And here's your quirky little fact of the day. Some frontier towns invented their own mail systems. Volunteers would run letters to the nearest real post station, often miles away, for a small fee, or a biscuit, or a new pair of socks. In one Colorado settlement, the designated mail runner was a half-blind man who jogged with a sack strapped to his back and a revolver tucked into his waistband. His motto was, "If I trip, shoot the letter." Not exactly inspiring, but probably effective. Back in town, you head toward the general store to restock your writing supplies, only to discover that they're out of paper. Again. Mrs. Everly shrugs when you ask. "Sold the last of it to the church folks," she says. "They're printing hymnals." You sigh. "Any idea when you'll get more?" She raises one eyebrow. "You think I got a telegraph to the paper fairy?" Which reminds you, there is a telegraph office in town. You've never used it, mostly because it costs more than your entire weekly ration of beans, and is operated by a man who types like he's angry at the alphabet. But desperate times, right? You find the telegraph office wedged between the undertaker's parlour and the building labelled simply GUNS. Subtle. Inside, it's all clicking and tapping, and the operator, a wiry man with wild eyebrows and suspenders holding up pants 3 sizes too big, barely glances at you. "Message?" he grunts, fingers hovering over the key. You hesitate. What do you say in a telegram? Every word costs money, and you only have a few coins left. You think for a second, then mutter, "Tell them, alive, send money, or socks." He nods, types it out in a flurry of clicks, then tells you the cost. Too much. You pay anyway, because the thought of getting a pair of socks in the mail is the most hope you've had in days. Outside, the sky has turned a lazy orange, the air soft with evening wind, and you wonder, truly, how anyone kept in touch at all back then. Every message is a gamble, every letter a leap of faith. No texts, no calls, just ink, hope, and weeks of waiting. And here's the kicker. Historians still debate how connected people really felt on the frontier. Some argue letters were cherished, read and reread until the ink faded. Others suggest that many folks just gave up. That distance became normal. That silence was easier than the heartbreak of a letter that never came. You walk back home, empty-handed, a little more lonely than before. Your letter might arrive, or it might end up in a rainstorm or used as a coffee filter in some canyon outpost. But you sent it. That's something. And if socks do show up in the next 2 months, you'll cry. You'll cry like a baby. The chill comes on quick out here. One moment you're sweating through your shirt and muttering about sunburns and grit in your socks, and the next You're wrapped in every thread of fabric you own, cursing your paper-thin walls and whatever God decided nighttime on the frontier should feel like camping inside an abandoned meat locker. You wake up in the dark, shivering under your blanket, which, let's be honest, is more of a suggestion than a source of warmth, and realise that something isn't right. Your head is pounding, your eyes ache, and your joints feel like they've been filled with gravel. You cough once, and it rattles out of your chest like a busted harmonica. Awesome! You're sick. Of course you're sick. You've been chewing on half-cooked beans, breathing dust storms, drinking bug soup out of a barrel, and sleeping under an uninsulated roof with a rodent roommate. Frankly, it's a miracle you didn't start coughing up tumbleweeds 2 days ago. You lie there for a minute, hoping it's just a chill, just a 24-hour thing. But the heat coming off your forehead suggests otherwise. You roll onto your side, try to stand, and immediately regret every choice you've made since birth. Your legs wobble, your head swims, you sit back down, trying not to black out. Outside, the town is starting to wake up. You can hear wagon wheels rattling, someone yelling at a mule, again, and the faint clink of coffee pots over morning fires. You should be out there. You should be working. You should be not dying. But you're not. You're wrapped in your stiff, scratchy blanket, sitting on your lopsided cot, nose dripping, chest wheezing, stomach gurgling, and slowly turning into a very whiny raisin. Eventually survival instincts kick in. You need help, not a friend, not a hug. No, what you need is the town doctor. And yes, this is the same man who ripped out your tooth with a pair of glorified barbecue tongs and told you to rinse with whatever alcohol you got. But choices are limited, and you don't have the energy to argue with the universe. You stumble your way across town like the world's saddest zombie, wrapped in your blanket like it's your last will and testament. People glance at you, then quickly look away. No one wants to make eye contact with illness. That's how you get cursed. You reach the doc's shack because calling it a clinic would be slander against real clinics, and knock weakly. No answer. You try again, and the door swings open on its own because of course it does. Inside, Doc Miller is at his usual spot, hunched over a table littered with empty bottles, a bone saw, and a pile of herbs that all smell like bad decisions. He looks up and squints. You again. "I think I'm dying," you say hoarsely. He scratches his chin. "You don't look dead." "Not yet," you croak. He sighs, waves you toward the table, and starts rummaging through a crate marked tonics, unlabeled. That feels about right. What follows is a medical experience so horrifying and surreal that you're honestly not sure if you imagined half of it. He presses your forehead, listens to your chest with the end of a funnel, and then pours something into a tin cup that smells like burnt licorice and swamp water. "Drink this," he says. "What is it?" "Don't ask." You drink it. Of course you do, because what's worse, mystery sludge or death? The flavour hits you like a punch made of mould and fire. You cough, your nose runs harder, and your stomach immediately starts sending warning signals in Morse code. Doc nods, satisfied. "That'll clear you out." Historically speaking, frontier medicine was a charming blend of guesswork, superstition, and sheer nerve. There were no antibiotics, no real understanding of infection. Doctors did what they could with herbs, whiskey, and trial-and-error techniques that killed almost as many people as they cured. Fever? Try leeches. Broken bone? Splint it and hope. Typhoid? Best of luck. Here's your quirky medical fact for the day. Some frontier remedies included hot tar poultices, arsenic tonics, and snake oil, which was literally oil from snakes, or whatever the travelling salesman could bottle and lie about. People drank kerosene for coughs, rinsed wounds with brandy. If you lived, great. If not, there was always a pine box out back. Back in the present, Doc Miller wraps something pungent around your neck, a cloth soaked in what smells like turpentine and regret, and tells you to sweat it out, which means go home, bundle up, and let the fever do its thing. You stumble back to your shack, curl into a ball, and spend the next several hours bouncing between chills and sweats, like you're trying to roast and freeze yourself at the same time. You hallucinate at some point. You're pretty sure you see a talking goat at the end of your bed. He tells you your boots are ugly. You don't disagree. Eventually your fever breaks. You wake up drenched in sweat, wrapped in your soggy blanket, and feeling like you've been steam cleaned by a demon. But you're breathing. Barely. You sit up. You ache. Your mouth tastes like that tonic's still trying to escape, but you're not dead. You stumble outside for fresh air and sit on your porch shivering despite the warmth of the evening. Across the road, A group of kids chase a chicken. A woman laughs at something her friend says. The world moves on. You, survivor of your own mucus apocalypse, feel like you've been through war. Scholars still argue how many illnesses were fatal on the frontier, and how many people simply toughed it out. Diaries mention weeks spent bedridden, mysterious fevers that came and went, or deaths that no one could name. The line between recovering and funeral was often paper thin and covered in phlegm. But for now, you're still here, congested, aching, bitter, but alive. And if nothing else, you now know that when the body fails, the frontier doesn't care. You heal or you don't. But the dust keeps blowing either way. Just when you think the worst is over, your fever broken, your stomach no longer staging revolts, your lungs clear enough to breathe without sounding like a haunted accordion, you remember one small but critical fact about the frontier. Nature doesn't wait for you to feel better, and now that the sun's dipping low and the air is finally shifting from furnace to tolerably warm, it's time for your next trial. You step outside your shack for some fresh air, hoping to celebrate being among the living again, and you are immediately assaulted by a buzzing sound so loud it feels personal. Mosquitoes. You swat reflexively, but it's already too late. One of them's bitten your neck and another's landed directly on your knuckles, smirking as it digs in. You flail, you slap, you twist like a man possessed, but they are relentless. Tiny airborne vampires with no sense of personal boundaries and an unshakable work ethic. You flee back inside and slam the door shut behind you, only to realise that a few have followed you in, gliding like smug little demons through the cracks in the walls. You stand still for a second, listening to the whine of wings circling your head, and suddenly you are filled with the kind of primal rage typically reserved for betrayal and stolen pie. You grab your boot, freshly frog-free, and begin swatting. 10 minutes later, your shack smells like sweat and desperation, and your arms are sore from swinging wildly at the air. You've managed to kill maybe 3 of them. Maybe. But you know there are more. Waiting, watching, planning their next assault. You try to sit still. Maybe if you don't move, they'll leave you alone. That's a lie. You're breathing. That's all they need. You wrap yourself in your blanket like a burrito of misery and regret, leaving just your nose exposed. They find your nose immediately. Historically, mosquitoes were more than just irritating. They were deadly. Out on the frontier, they weren't just a nuisance buzzing in your ear while you tried to sleep. They were full-on disease delivery systems. Malaria and other mosquito-borne illnesses ravage communities with no warning, especially near standing water, swamps, or slow-moving rivers. And guess what your town has right behind the stables? A perfectly disgusting little swampy creek. Great. Fun fact, the term mosquito bar wasn't a place to drink. It was a gauzy net that people hung around their beds to keep the bugs out, if they could afford it. Most couldn't. Instead, they smeared their skin with anything they thought might repel the bugs. Mud, bear fat, vinegar, onion juice. Some even believed smoke from a dung fire kept mosquitoes away. You're not quite desperate enough to try that last one. Yet. You light a stub of a candle and wave it around like that'll help. It doesn't. You consider burning sage, but the only herb you have is something Doc Miller gave you that smells like sadness, and probably makes hallucinations worse. You also have 1 lemon, shriveled and tragic, and you briefly think about rubbing it on your arms. Why not? You already smell like old laundry. You step outside again, armed with a blanket and your lemon, hoping the cooler night air might be safer. It is not. The mosquitoes are worse now, bolder. The breeze stirs them into little clouds, dancing on the wind like confetti from the devil's birthday party. They land on your cheeks, your neck, your eyelids. You slap one mid-bite and leave a tiny smear on your face. You don't even care. It's war now. And the worst part? It's not just mosquitoes. It's gnats, midges, unidentified flying irritants that seem to appear from the cracks in the earth the second the sun sets. Your skin is crawling. Your nerves are frayed. You walk laps around your shack, waving your arms like you're signalling ships from shore, whispering curses in a dozen variations of rage. This is what bedtime looks like now. The bugs always come out at night. The sun goes down, and suddenly you're on the menu. You never realize just how many crevices you had on your body, until each one is bitten individually and with great enthusiasm. There's debate among historians about how people coped with this. Some say folks just learned to live with the bites, scratching through the night and praying not to get infected. Others say entire homes were rebuilt to reduce the number of entry points. Double shutters, thick cloth over windows, doors sealed with oil-soaked rags. You try to shove a pair of socks into the gap beneath your door. It helps for all of 2 minutes. You finally climb under your blanket again, using your hat to cover your face, swearing softly with every new bite. The sound of buzzing near your ear triggers a full-body shiver. You swat. You miss. You lay there in silence, waiting, listening. Nothing. You relax. BZ. You scream into your hat. You try distraction. You hum. You tell yourself stories. You count backwards from 100, imagining a world where bugs were just scenery and not your mortal enemies. But your legs itch. Your scalp itches. Your entire being is a battlefield of welts and paranoia. You sit up and dump your boot just to make sure no bugs are inside. A spider falls out. Of course it does. You laugh. Out loud. Just a single, broken, sleepless laugh into the night air. And as if summoned by your descent into madness, the wind dies completely. The air becomes perfectly still. The mosquitoes celebrate by throwing a rave directly around your head. You give up. You go outside, sit on your porch and let them eat you. If this is your fate, so be it. You stare into the night, covered in bites, buzzing with rage and lemon juice, a hollowed-out husk of who you were yesterday. Eventually the breeze returns, the temperature drops, the bugs retreat, maybe full, maybe just tired. You sit there, eyes glazed, body twitching with phantom itches. You survive the bite-pocalypse. Barely. Morning breaks, not with gentle light or the peaceful chirping of birds, but with a donkey braying directly outside your window, like it's trying to summon the end times. You jolt upright, your arms covered in mosquito bites, your eyes puffy from exactly 2 hours of sleep, and your brain already simmering with a headache born from equal parts exhaustion and mild blood loss. You shuffle to the door and peek outside. There it is, the donkey, standing in your yard like it owns the place, chewing something that may or may not be a shirt. It stares at you with blank, soulless eyes and lets out another piercing eardrum violator of a screech. You slam the door shut and lean against it. You can't. Not today. But the frontier doesn't ask if you're ready. The frontier requires. Your task today? Laundry. Now you may think, how hard could that be? But out here, laundry isn't just a chore. It's an entire event, like a sporting competition for people who hate comfort. There's no washer, no detergent pods, no delicate cycle. There's a barrel, a bar of lye soap, a metal washboard that could shred cheese, and a pair of arms that barely work after yesterday's bug-induced flailing. You gather your laundry, your one shirt, your nearly sentient socks, and the trousers that now have more dust than thread. You carry it all in a dented tin basin to the communal pump at the edge of town. It's already occupied by 3 other people, a woman scrubbing with the vengeance of a betrayed goddess, a boy who looks like he's doing it as punishment, and an old man who may have been born at this wash station and simply never left. You wait your turn, arms full, the smell of your own clothes rising like a passive-aggressive ghost around you. Finally, the woman nods and moves aside. You step up, pump the handle a few times, and ice-cold water gushes into the basin, splashing over your hands and instantly waking up nerves you thought had died last week. You drop in your clothes, add a chunk of soap and begin scrubbing like your life depends on it, which frankly, it might. Laundry on the frontier wasn't weekly, it wasn't even bi-weekly. It happened when the dirt reached critical mass, or the smell was strong enough to kill flies mid-air. Lye soap was homemade, usually with animal fat and wood ash, and had all the gentleness of sandpaper. Your hands burn, your knuckles scrape, you swear you can hear your shirt weeping. The washboard is effective, sure, but it also feels like you're punishing the fabric for existing. You slap the shirt against the board again and again, watching brownish-grey water swirl in your basin. A splash hits your face. You taste it. It is unwise. Fun historical fact. Many frontier folks did laundry with boiling water, especially for underthings and linens. Boil it, beat it with a paddle, rinse it, wring it out, and then, if you're lucky, hang it in the sun and hope no birds decide to leave comments on your hard work. You don't have boiling water. You don't even have clean water. You settle for cold and semi-wet, which is about as good as it gets today. After what feels like hours, your clothes are marginally cleaner. They're at least damp instead of crusty, and that counts as progress. You drag your basin over to the rope line behind your shack, strung between two poles that lean like they're trying to escape, and hang each item up with clothespins so old they're more suggestion than hardware. And then, the wind picks up. You stand there, watching your shirt flap like a flag of surrender, praying it doesn't blow away. You turn around to pin your socks, and whoosh! Your shirt sails off the line and into a patch of dried thistle like a dramatic diva making an exit. You chase it. Of course you do. Through the thistles, over a rock, you trip, land flat on your face, stand back up with a mouthful of dirt and 2 fresh scratches on your arms. But you get it. You get the shirt. You hold it up in victory just as it catches on a branch and tears a 6-inch gash under the armpit. You stare at the tear. The shirt stares back. You whisper, "You're lucky I don't burn you." Sewing repairs are now part of your to-do list. You return to your line, hang everything up again and glare at the sky like you dare it to rain. It doesn't. Not yet. Scholars debate how frontier folks kept themselves clean in general. Some argue that hygiene was taken surprisingly seriously. Sunday baths, perfumed oils, even community bathhouses in some towns. Others say people stank to high heaven and simply got used to the scent of each other's decay. Judging by the number of flies interested in your laundry, you suspect the truth leans more toward everyone was nose-blind and in denial. And here's your oddball historical fact of the day. During especially hot summers, some settlers would wash their clothes in the same creek they bathed in. Together. As in, clothes on one side, people on the other, if you got caught mixing sides. Scandal, fines, public shaming, possibly a new nickname that stuck for decades. Back at your shack, you sit in the dirt and stare at your flapping clothes like a rancher protecting cattle. You're sunburned, itchy, sore, and still thinking about that donkey. Your socks are steaming gently in the heat. Your shirt flaps with an attitude, and your pants somehow look worse wet. Still, there's something almost peaceful in the moment. You survived the night of bugs. You didn't drown in lye water. You even got a shirt cleaned, sort of. You lean back, close your eyes, and breathe in the crisp smell of soap, sun, and faint mildew. You could almost pretend life is calm, until the donkey returns and eats one of your socks. You're halfway through yelling at a donkey that clearly has zero remorse about chewing your only pair of halfway decent socks when you realise something terrifying. It's almost the end of the month. Rent is due. You sit there, one sock damp and shredded, your laundry line flapping like it's mocking you, and you do the math. What little math your fever-rattled brain can still handle. You're broke. You were already poor, sure, but now, you're broke and bitten, sunburnt, missing one sock, and owed absolutely nothing by a town that sees you as more decorative than useful. If this were Monopoly, you'd have just landed on Boardwalk with a hotel and a mortgage. So you do the only thing left. You go looking for work. Again. You start at the general store where Mrs. Everleigh's unpacking a crate of pickled eggs that smells like something dug up from a Civil War trench. You ask if she needs help. She eyes you, sniffs loudly and says, "Unless you're good at scrubbing barrels or holding still for long periods of time while being ignored, no." That feels personal, but okay. Next, you check with the stable. The stable hand, who looks about 13 but smokes a cigar the size of a corncob, shrugs and says, "You got your tetanus shots?" before laughing like that's the funniest joke in 3 counties. You go to the saloon. Now you know better than to ask to bartend. That's a sacred position reserved for people with incredible facial hair and the ability to crush a bottle with one hand, but you offer to sweep, maybe help clean the back rooms. The bartender gives you a long, slow once-over and says, "You clean like you shoot?" You're not sure if that's an insult or a compliment, but either way he tells you to come back tomorrow. Maybe. Which leaves you with only one real option. The mine. You've avoided it so far. Because even on your worst days, yes, including the one with the snake and the boot frog, you've never stooped to that. But today, you're desperate. And if you want to keep your shack, your bed, and the place where your remaining sock used to live, you need coin. So you walk. It's a couple of miles out of town, across cracked earth and between hills that look like the bones of giant long-dead animals. You pass a man hauling 2 pickaxes in one hand and a jug of moonshine in the other. He nods at you like he's headed to war. The mine itself is a black mouth in the side of a hill surrounded by crumbling shacks and rusting carts. A group of men gathers near the entrance, covered in soot and bad attitudes. The foreman stands off to the side, clipboard in hand, cigar clamped in his teeth like he's trying to kill it with sheer willpower. You approach. Name? He grunts. You give it. He doesn't write it down. Experience? I have a shovel, you say. and instantly regrets saying it like that's a resume. He stares, then tosses you a helmet that looks like it's been used to put out fires. You're in. Tunnel 3. Stay out of Tunnel 5 unless you want to meet God. He doesn't smile when he says that. You follow a grizzled guy named Ren into the mine. He's got one eye, a limp, and a handshake that feels like shaking a bag of rocks. As you walk in, the light disappears behind you like a curtain dropping, and suddenly you're in another world. A darker one, a damper one that smells like sulphur, sweat, and the kind of secrets people bury deep in the earth. You're instantly claustrophobic. The ceiling sags, the walls sweat, the supports creak, and the only light comes from a series of sad little lanterns that flicker like they're considering retirement. Ren hands you a rusted pickaxe and points to a section of wall. Hit that until you hate yourself, then hit it some more. So you do. The first swing nearly takes your own knee out. The second barely scratches the wall. By the third, your shoulder is screaming, and your hands are blistering. You glance around. The other men are machines, swinging, digging, lifting, hauling, covered in grime, breathing like dragons, dead-eyed but determined. You're not built for this, but you try. Because that's the thing about the West. It doesn't care if you're tired or sick or emotionally fragile. It only cares if you show up. You pick, you dig, you haul rocks in a cart that rolls about as well as a coffin on gravel. You lose track of time. There are no clocks here, just the sound of metal against stone and the occasional rumble that makes you stop breathing. Historically, frontier mines were death traps with business cards. Safety regulations were non-existent. If you died, you were replaced by the next desperate soul in line. Gas pockets, cave-ins, and equipment failure were just part of the shift. People joked that if you made it to payday with all 10 fingers, you deserved a bonus. Quirky fact. Some miners brought canaries, not for song but as living alarm systems. If the bird died, you left. Fast. You look around. No birds in sight. Just one guy coughing like he's been inhaling gravel since birth, and another with fingers so blackened it's unclear if he's wearing gloves or just cursed. Hours pass. Maybe. Your arms feel like wet rope. Your shirt clings to your back with a mix of sweat and rock dust. Your eyes sting. Your mouth is dry. You've drank all your water. You think you might be hallucinating a bit, either that or someone is humming Camptown Races off-key in Tunnel 2. Eventually the foreman shouts, and the men start trudging back toward daylight like a group of filthy ghosts. You follow them, blinking as the light stabs your retinas. You're sunburnt and soot-covered now, a rare achievement. Back at the foreman's shack, he drops 2 silver coins into your hand. 2, for 6 hours of manual labour and permanent shoulder damage. You stare at them. Don't spend it all in one place, he says without a hint of irony. You walk back to town slowly, coins tucked deep into your pocket like sacred relics. It's not much, but it's rent. Maybe. And more than that, it's survival. Barely. You don't even make it to your porch before you collapse. Your body gives up roughly 10 feet from the front door, knees buckling like cheap scaffolding, face narrowly missing a pile of donkey droppings. You just lie there for a minute, cheek in the dirt, arms splayed like a dropped puppet. 2 silver coins pressed into your palm so tightly they've left little sunburned imprints. You don't have the strength to move. A tumbleweed rolls past and pauses like it's judging you. That's fine. Let it. Everyone else has. Eventually you crawl. Yes, crawl the rest of the way home and flop onto your cot like a fish that's just given up. You're coated in a thin, glistening film of sweat, dust, and mine grime. You can taste the rock dust in your teeth. You're not even sure how it got there. Probably through your ears. Everything hurts, including places you didn't know had nerve endings. You try to lift your arm. It says no. You try to roll over. Also number. So you just lie there watching the cracked ceiling thinking, I worked 6 hours to earn enough money to buy 1 chicken or 3 candles or half a bucket of clean water. Maybe, if you haggle, and still pay extra for the bucket. You glance at your laundry line through the warped window. Your clothes are still there somehow. Your remaining sock has survived another day. Small blessings. You also notice that the donkey is back and now chewing on something that might have once been your journal. You make a mental note to eat that donkey one day, or at least name it something rude. After what feels like an eternity, your stomach growls, loudly, with conviction. A statement, not a request. You consider ignoring it, but the pangs become louder, more persistent, like your guts banging pots together and chanting, "Feed me or die." So you peel yourself off the cot and shuffle over to your food shelf. It's bleak. 2 hard biscuits, a questionable strip of jerky, and somehow 1 more can of beans. You honestly don't remember buying it. It might have appeared through sheer spite. You heat the beans over your tiny stove, which is basically a rusted metal box you whisper threats to until it agrees to light. The flame flickers to life, and you drop the beans on top, letting them bubble and hiss like a low-budget witch's brew. As they cook, you find yourself staring at the wall. You're not thinking exactly, just existing, floating in a tired fog of aches, mosquito scabs, and existential confusion. What are you doing here? What was the point again? Simpler life? Personal growth? Escaping the modern world? You're starting to suspect your brain was concussed when it made that decision. Your beans are done. You eat straight from the pan, burning your tongue immediately. You don't care. Flavour's long been replaced by the dull satisfaction of not starving. The jerky is so tough it might be made from old belts, but you chew it anyway like a cow grinding down a tyre. And then, because there's nothing else to do and your body won't allow movement, you lie back down and stare at the ceiling again. You hear someone shouting in the distance, something about goats and a fence. A dog barks, a baby cries. Life continues around you, noisy and raw and uninterested in your personal crisis. Historically, this was normal. Exhaustion was the default mode for most frontier folks. After working all day in a field, a mine, or a mill, they'd come home to chores, children, and barely edible food. Rest was rare. Sleep was shallow. And any moment not spent producing something was seen as lazy. Frontier guilt was real. Even now you feel a twinge of it for lying down. But your quirky historical fact of the day, there was a counterculture of frontier loafers, men and women who bounced from town to town doing the absolute minimum to survive. They worked just enough to pay for food and a place to sleep, then spent their time playing cards, writing bad poetry, or staring into space. Some were treated as freeloaders, others as folk heroes. The West may have worshipped work, but it quietly envied rest. You think you might be becoming one of them, a drifter of the mind, a layabout philosopher with mosquito scars and heat stroke. You haven't bathed in days. Your socks are mismatched. You speak to animals more than people. You've become what every ancestor in your bloodline feared, a dusty poet with nothing left to lose. Later, just as the sun starts to set and the world turns gold again, you force yourself to stand. You shuffle to the well, splash your face, and stare at your reflection in the water. It's not good. You look like someone who lost a fight with a chimney sweep and then got stung by bees. You laugh. It starts as a snort, turns into a wheeze, and finally becomes a full-body chuckle. Not because anything is funny, but because it's all so stupid. The work, the dirt, the beans, the snake, the donkey, the sock-eating, the child thieves, the mine, the cough syrup that may have been flammable. It's absurd. And you're still here. That's the real miracle. You haven't packed up and run screaming into the desert. Yet. You head back inside and collapse again, but this time, it's different. This time you lie there with a weird kind of pride. You survived a full day in a mine. You earned money. You cooked your beans. And no one tried to rob you. That's what counts as a win out here. The wind kicks up. You hear it rustling your drying pants on the line. You pray they don't blow away. You mutter a few sleepy curses at the donkey, now asleep beside your porch like it pays rent. And then, finally, your body lets you drift off. Not into a deep, restful sleep, but into the kind of doze where your dreams are made of rocks, jerky, and endless echoing pickaxe sounds. You're still hungry, you're still sore, but you're still alive. Barely. You wake up to find a goat on your chest. Not next to your chest. Not near your chest. On your chest. Its little hooves are planted firmly between your ribs, and its weird rectangular pupils are staring into your soul like it's judging your life choices. And honestly, fair. You're not even surprised. You're just too tired to scream. You blink. The goat blinks back. Somewhere outside, someone shouts a name that might be Clementine, followed by a very specific threat involving stew. The goat bleats in response, hops off your chest like you're just another piece of furniture, and trots through your open door like it owns the place. You stare at the ceiling for a moment longer, seriously considering whether this is all still a fever dream, or if goats just happen now. Eventually you get up, slowly. Your body still feels like it's been used to test saddle durability, but you're upright, and that counts as progress. Your shoulders ache, your legs wobble, your face itches in about 6 places, which probably means the Mosquito's held another late-night banquet in your honour. You wander out onto the porch and sit down, letting the morning sun wash over your face. The town is waking up around you, as usual, with a combination of shouting, livestock and distant gunfire that no one reacts to. Probably just someone's idea of an alarm clock. Your stomach growls, reminding you that you haven't had a proper meal since the last time someone else was cooking. Which gives you a terrible idea. Go to the diner. Now, diner might be a strong word. It's more of a shack with chairs. But it does have a stove, and someone behind it who knows how to do more than heat up beans and cry. So you shuffle down the dusty road, coins clinking in your pocket like they know this is the end. The moment you walk in, you're hit with the smell of grease, burnt coffee, and something vaguely meaty. You're not picky anymore. You sit at the counter, which leans just enough to make you feel off balance, and nod at the cook, a woman named Mabel who has arms like tree trunks and a permanent frown etched into her face. She doesn't say anything. She just slaps a plate down in front of you. 2 eggs, probably. Something that used to be bread, and bacon that may or may not still be moving. You nod politely and start eating. It tastes like pure greasy victory. Historically, food on the frontier was more about survival than satisfaction. You ate what you had, when you had it, and you didn't complain unless you wanted to go hungry. Most meals were some combination of beans, cornbread, salted meat, and whatever root vegetable hadn't gone soft in the root cellar. If you were lucky enough to be near a trade route, maybe you got some sugar or coffee. If not, well, hope you like chewing on dried apples and regret. Quirky food fact for the day. Ketchup was sometimes used as a medicine back then. People believed it helped digestion, cured diarrhea, and even fixed jaundice. You look at the red blob on your plate and decide not to ask what's in it. As you chew, a man sits down next to you and strikes up a conversation. His name is Silas. He's missing a finger, has a laugh like a faulty bellows, and tells you he used to be a trapper but now he sells buttons. People don't appreciate buttons, he says between bites of sausage. They hold society together. You nod like that's the wisest thing you've ever heard. You finish your meal, leave your last coins on the counter, and step outside feeling slightly more human and significantly more broke. You're now officially penniless. But for the first time in a while, your stomach isn't trying to eat itself, and that's a rare kind of joy. Back at your shack, you do what everyone in this town seems to do when they're not working. You sit. You find a spot on your porch that doesn't creak too much, lean back, and let your brain unwind. It takes a while. You're not used to stillness, but eventually you stop thinking about laundry, about mines, about socks and bugs and pickaxes and goats. You just sit, and then you hear music. Not the usual fiddle and banjo chaos from the saloon. Something softer. A harmonica, maybe. A slow, winding tune that floats down the street like it doesn't care who's listening. It's being played by an old man in a rocking chair outside the barber shop. You watch as he sways back and forth, eyes closed, fingers moving with ease. No audience, no coin cup, just music for the sake of it. It's beautiful, and weirdly, that's what hits you. Not the snakes or the sickness or the hunger or the hard labour. It's this quiet moment in the middle of a dirt-covered, half-broken town where a man plays a song and a goat chews on someone's laundry, and the world, somehow, keeps spinning. This is what no one tells you about the Wild West. It's not all gunfights and glory. It's boredom. It's absurdity. It's small kindnesses and weird neighbours and trying to get your boots on without stepping in something alive. It's hard. It's hilarious. And sometimes in the middle of all the chaos, it's calm. There's a scholarly argument about what truly defined frontier life. Some say it was the struggle, the relentless push to survive against impossible odds. Others say it was the community, the relationships built out of shared suffering and borrowed sugar. But maybe it was both. Maybe it was this, the strange little in-between moments that made the rest of it bearable. You listen to the harmonica until the tune fades. Then you lie back on your porch, hat over your eyes, one sock missing, one dream still hanging on by a thread. You've made it this far. Not well, not with grace. But you're still here. And in the Wild West, that counts for everything. The air is thick with heat again, the kind that presses down on your shoulders and wraps around your neck like a judgmental scarf. You've given up on wearing your shirt at this point. It's drying on the porch after yesterday's laundry misadventure. Still stained, still torn, still valiantly pretending to be clothing. You sit out front, shirtless, sunburned and sore. sipping lukewarm water from a cracked tin cup and trying to look like someone who meant to be here. You didn't, let's be honest. You came out here with some vague idea of grit and freedom and finding yourself. What you've actually found is a collection of increasingly weird injuries, a complete distrust of all livestock, and the growing suspicion that you might be allergic to the entire concept of nature. But today, you're facing one final test, the town's monthly social event. They call it a gathering, which sounds harmless, charming even, like a picnic or a church potluck. In reality, it's a wild mixture of awkward conversation, cheap alcohol, semi-religious fiddle music, and at least 3 fistfights, sometimes 4 if the preacher shows up late. You'd plan to avoid it. Truly. But your neighbour, an elderly woman named Maud with a cane sharper than most knives, has already knocked on your door 3 times this morning to remind you it's rude not to attend. You tried explaining you don't own anything nice to wear. She stared at your pants for 10 silent seconds and said, "You think that stopped anyone here?" So here you are, bathed, barely, shirt patched with a needle and enough cursing to be considered witchcraft, and pockets empty except for a single piece of hard candy you found behind the bed. You tuck that away like a secret emergency ration and walk toward the town square, every step sending protests up your legs like you're walking on broken broomsticks. The gathering takes place near the chapel, just a dusty open space between a few benches and the world's saddest excuse for a stage. Someone strung up lanterns made from old jars, and a goat has already claimed the refreshment table, possibly the goat. You nod at it. It ignores you. People mill about in the kind of haphazard clusters you get when nobody really knows what they're doing. Some are in Sunday clothes, others look like they just came from a cattle wrestle. You spot Sheriff Thompson in his usual dusty hat, sipping something brown from a dented mug and trying to look like he's not actively bored. And there's Mabel from the diner, arms crossed, leaning against a post like she's judging the whole event with her eyebrows. You wave. She nods once. It's the warmest greeting you've gotten in weeks. You find a spot near the edge of the crowd and hover awkwardly, trying to blend in. Someone hands you a cup of lemonade. You take it. It's warm, too sweet, possibly made with creek water, but it's better than dying of thirst. Barely. The music starts. 2 fiddlers, a washboard, and a man playing a jug like he means it. You recognise the tune. It's the same song you heard on the harmonica the other day. Slower now, more chaotic. But there's something kind of nice about it. People begin to dance, not in any organised way, more like clusters of movement, elbows flying, boots stomping, a lot of uncoordinated enthusiasm. You sit on a crate and watch, sipping your mystery lemonade, and for the first time you feel a little less out of place. A girl passes by and smiles at you. Her dress is patched, her hands are calloused, and she looks like she could outfence half the town. She nods toward the dancing. You shake your head, raise your cup, and mouth the words, "old injury." She laughs and moves on. You sit there swaying to the music and think, this is what they meant by community. Not the fancy kind with bake sales and matching lawn chairs, the messy kind. People who yell and borrow your tools without asking, who steal your socks and then bring you soup when you're sick. People who wouldn't think twice about pulling you out of a ditch, but also wouldn't apologise if they pushed you into one for fun. Here's your historical fact. Community gatherings were often the only real entertainment in frontier towns. No movie theatres, no sports teams, just dancing, food, and awkward attempts at courtship under torchlight. Sometimes it was a barn raising, sometimes a harvest festival, and sometimes, like now, it was just a reason to be near other people, to remember you weren't completely alone out here in the dust and the dark. Quirky bonus? There are letters from settlers describing shindigs, where people dance so hard the floorboards broke. One woman wrote about having to dance around a hole in the middle of the room, like a cursed maypole. Another claimed the preacher danced so wildly he kicked over the communion wine and started a small fire. You look at this crowd and think, yeah, that tracks. You finish your lemonade and stand. Your legs hate you, but they're used to it by now. You walk slowly toward the edge of the crowd again, where someone's serving stew from a cauldron that looks like it's seen 3 wars. You take a bowl. It's mostly beans. Of course. But there's something else in there. Maybe meat. Maybe hope. You eat it anyway. The music swells. People laugh. A kid runs by with no shoes and someone else's hat. A woman yells after him. Someone else throws a pie. It's unclear if that was planned. You just stand there, chewing mystery stew and smiling like an idiot. You made it. You're still broke, still sore, still very possibly allergic to air, but you made it through a day in the mines, a night of mosquitoes, a week of bean dinners, and one emotional showdown with a sock-eating donkey. And now you're here, standing in a crowd of dusty, sweaty, deeply weird humans who somehow made room for you too. And you're not dead. You feel the music in your chest, low and steady, and maybe for the first time since arriving you don't feel like an imposter. Just another tired, dusty soul trying to survive. Fitting in not because you changed, but because the frontier has no time to notice you're different. It just keeps going. And somehow, now, you're going with it. And so, night falls again on this stubborn, strange little town at the edge of nowhere. The music has faded, the lanterns have burned low, and the people have drifted home, some wobbling, some whistling, one definitely dragging a chair they didn't arrive with. You walk back to your shack under a heavy star-punched sky, boots scuffing the dirt, hands in your pockets, stomach full of questionable stew and peace. Not happiness exactly, but something quieter, something heavier, warmer, like the comfort of dry socks after a week of rain. Your door creaks open, and the smell of sun-dried clothes and stale air greets you. Familiar now. You hang up what's left of your patched shirt, check your boots for snakes out of sheer habit, and lower yourself onto the cot that no longer squeaks as loud when you shift. Maybe it's grown tired of complaining too. You lie there, staring up at the ceiling, the sound of the wind whistling gently through the cracks in the walls. Somewhere outside, the goat bleats one last time before sleep. Probably chewing on someone else's laundry now, hopefully not yours. And here, at the quiet end of all things, the sickness, the bites, the mines, the mail heist, the frog in your boot, the child thief, the donkey with no respect for footwear, you finally let your eyelids fall, because you've survived what few could. You've tasted grit in your teeth, listened to your bones creak under labour, learned to fear both snakes and beans. You've failed repeatedly, lost dignity in spectacular ways, and still, you're here. Not thriving, but enduring. And sometimes, that's enough. So sleep now, let the dust settle. Let the desert air wrap around you like a lullaby hummed by the wind. You're part of the West now, begrudgingly, painfully, hilariously, and you'll make it through another day.